Chapter 4038 Poached Egg Battle Team. When Qin Bufan and the others heard the crowd's discussion, they wished they could find a hole to hide in. However, when they thought about what Yun Chuzhou said, they could only pretend to be invincible. Li Zhuangji stared at them and said, "Stop talking nonsense. If you're not in the top 100, then step aside. Only the top 100 have the qualifications to compete with our Big Dipper battle team." The crowd was angered by Li Zhuangzi's shameless words until they gritted their teeth and cursed one after another. "Li Zhuangji, go ahead and be arrogant. I see that ever since your relationship with Yun Chuzhou eased up, your brain has become abnormal." "That's right. Previously, you were bullied to such an extent by Yun Chuzhou. Now you actually got mixed up with Yun Chuzhou. You're really heartless." Top 100? Tui. With how they are, they can be dealt with by any group of 7. They can just wait to embarrass themselves. However, most of the disciples ranked in the top 100 laughed it off. If it was a normal month, they could play with these 7 idiots. However, this time, the top 100 was related to the qualifications of the Eye of Sword Intent. It was better to avoid unnecessary complications. However, some people were tempted. This was a good opportunity to earn money. These 7 trash could be easily taken care of. A total of 7 million. Everyone would be able to get 1 million if they got their hands on it. Where would they find such a good thing that fell from the sky? Hence, a few inner sect disciples who were ranked within the top 100 hit it off. They immediately gathered 7 people and even came up with the name of the Sun Battle Team. Obviously, this name also surpassed the Big Dipper Battle Team. How could a mere Big Dipper star be compared to the radiance of the sun? The leader of the Sun Battle Team, a disciple called Liao Tao, walked in front of Li Zhuangji and said, "Do you mean what you said? If you lose, you will give us 7 million spirit stones?" "Of course. However, if we win, our ranking will have to be switched with yours. After all, we have invested a lot in order to get the spot for the Eye of Sword Intent." Li Zhuangji curled his lips and said. Liao Tao looked at him contemptuously. "Of course. This is the rule of the competition stage. Since both of us have no objections, let's register with the manager." Li Zhuangji pretended to be calm and nodded. However, he looked around and did not find any trace of Yun Chuzhou. He was anxious. Why wasn't this ancestor here yet? Just as he was anxious, he saw Yun Chuzhou come. However, this fellow did not come by himself. Instead, he came with Elder Duanmu and Elder Dongfang. Yun Chuzhou said to the 2 of them in a lackey manner, "Elders, the competition is about to begin. You 2 just wait and see." Elder Duanmu snorted coldly. "Yun Chuzhou, I'll give you one last piece of advice. Don't overestimate yourself." Elder Dongfang's words were more tactful. "Little girl, if you really want to go to the Eye of Sword Intent, we can think of another way. It's better if you don't go on stage." Yun Chuzhou said with a smile, "Thank you for your kind intentions, elders. Since I've already said it, I naturally can't go back on my words. I only hope that you 2 elders can help me be a witness so that our Big Dipper battle team doesn't lose and the Fried Egg battle team on the other side won't admit defeat." Fried Egg. The corners of Elder Duanmu and Elder Dongfang's eyes twitched. She was originally from the Sun Battle Team, all right? But when she said that she was from the Fried Egg Battle Team, this little girl's mouth was really vicious. Chapter 4039. Who will make the first move? After Yun Chuzhou finished speaking, she hopped to the side of the competition stage to go through the registration procedures. This guy was very thorough. If they won, the other side would not admit their defeat. In addition to the encouragement of others, wouldn't she be wasting her efforts? Therefore, early in the morning, she had persuaded the 2 big Buddhas to come. This way, she was not afraid that someone would go back on their words. The manager in charge of registration was also dumbfounded. Although there wasn't a clause in the rules that forbade the formation of teams, this was really the first time he had encountered such a situation. He was caught off guard for a moment. Putting everything else aside, this competition stage had to be rebuilt. After all, how could 2 people be the same as 14 people? Therefore, the manager immediately arranged for the odd job workers to merge the few competition stages. Fortunately, it was already the last day, and the competition was basically about to begin. The bet in the southeast corner was even more heated. Of course, 99% of the people were betting on Team Sun to win, and only a few people were betting on the Big Dipper battle team. Right at this moment, Yun Chujio swaggered over and directly threw out 5 million high-grade spirit stones to bet on the Big Dipper battle team to win. The group of people looked at Yun Chujio as if they were looking at a fool. This Yun Chujio's brain was really sick. She had spent 12 million upper-grade spirit stones in one go. She really had money to burn. After Yun Chujio placed her bet, the competition stage was also completed. The newly made competition stage was filled with disciples who were watching the show. Of course, Elder Dongfang and Elder Duanmu naturally wouldn't squeeze in the crowd. Instead, they were invited by the steward to sit in the judges' area on the competition stage. The steward was just about to ring the bronze bell to signal the start of the competition when he realized that there was one person missing. Li Zhuangji and the other three looked speechlessly at Yun Chujio, who was strolling around not far away from the competition stage. They thought to themselves, "What time is it now? Hurry up and get on the stage." Finally, when Yun Chujio slowly got onto the competition stage, the steward rang the bronze bell to signal that the competition could begin. The 7 members of Team Sun looked at Yun Chujio and the others with disdain. They thought to themselves that these little trash could probably be dealt with in 15 minutes. Liao Tao said with contempt, "I advise you to just admit defeat. Otherwise, don't blame us for not being polite. After all, this sword has no eyes. If we hurt you, it will hurt the harmony." The corner of Yun Chujio's mouth curled up. TSK, let's not talk about anything else. Your team's name is too outdated. What poached egg team? If you don't lose, it will be absolutely unacceptable. Poached egg? Liao Tao's face stiffened. We are the Sun team, not some poached egg team. Let's cut the crap and do it. On account of your low spiritual power, I'll let you guys do it first. Yun Chujio curled her lips. Do we still need you to let us do it? You guys do it first. After all, you guys are a bunch of useless names. I reckon your spiritual power isn't that great. When Liao Tao heard Yun Chujio's words, he snorted coldly and said, "You really overestimate yourselves. Since you guys are asking for humiliation, then don't blame us for being impolite. Brothers, let's go." The few disciples behind Liao Tao were just about to show their arms and roll up their sleeves to start a fight when Yun Chujio raised her hand. "Wait a moment. I think what you said just now makes sense. It's better for us to make our move first." When Liao Tao and the others heard that, they could not be more contemptuous. This Yun Chujio was just a show-off. Now, wasn't she admitting defeat? Therefore, he signaled the others to let Yun Chujio and the others make the first move. After all, their spiritual power was much higher than Yun Chujio and the others. They would definitely win anyway, so they might as well earn a good reputation. Chapter 40 Transformation Formation. Yun Chujio waved her hand, and Zhao Hui and the others all charged towards Liao Tao. It was obvious that they intended to gather all their strength and heavily injure one of them first. Although Liao Tao's spiritual power was higher than any of Yun Chujio and the others, and it was not just a little bit higher, no matter how powerful he was still not a match for Yun Chujio and the others. Liao Tao was clearly caught off guard, and his companions did not expect such a scene. For a moment, they were a little confused. By the time they reacted, Liao Tao was already wounded, and his injuries were not light. He had basically lost his combat ability. The disciples watching from below the stage were all dumbstruck. How could he play with them like this? One was crippled just like that? Liao Tao swallowed a few pills. He was angry and in pain. He almost fainted. He said to his other companions, Go. This is outrageous." Yun Chujio took advantage of the time when the others were fighting to kick Liao Tao, who was shouting in anger, to the bottom of the stage. This time, it was much quieter. When the remaining 6 members of Team Sun saw this, their attacks became even fiercer. Although they were 1 person short, they still had enough confidence to defeat Yun Chujio's 7 people. After all, the difference in strength was obvious. In less than half an hour, Yun Chujiu and the other three were clearly at a disadvantage. Zhao Hui and the others had already been injured to varying degrees. Elder Duanmu shook his head. Although Yun Chujiu had used her cleverness to gain the upper hand, the difference in strength was still too great. She was afraid that she would be defeated. At this moment, Yun Chujiu's clear shout was heard, "Set up the formation." Immediately, Yun Chujiu and the other three changed their positions and formed the 7-star sword formation. Elder Dongfang stroked his beard. He scolded jokingly, "That little girl is really smart." She took the initiative and crippled one member of the poached egg battle team. This way, because the poached egg battle team doesn't have enough manpower, they can only fight one-on-one or use the 5-element sword formation, which is much weaker than the 7-star sword formation. This way, there will be variables. Elder Duanmu snorted lightly. Even so, I still think highly of the poached egg battle team. The corner of the steward's eyes twitched. The poached egg battle team? Not to mention anything else, just by listening to what they said, he knew that they were speaking for Yun Chujiu. Yun Chujiu and the other three had the advantage of the sword formation, so the situation had turned from one-sided to evenly matched. At this moment, Liao Tao had already recovered a little after taking the pill. However, he had already been kicked to the bottom of the stage, so he could not go up again. He was so angry that his face was red, and his neck was thick. He shouted at his companions on the stage, "Grit your teeth and hold on. Your spiritual power is much higher than theirs. As time passes, they will naturally reveal their flaws." The vast majority of the surrounding disciples agreed with Liao Tao's words. Although the two sides were tied, as long as Team Sun held on, the Big Dipper battle team would definitely fall into a disadvantageous position in an hour at most. Zhao Hui and the others were very nervous. Although the previous plan had succeeded, the most crucial step was the next step. Would this work? At this moment, Yun Chujiu made a hand gesture. "Change the formation." Change the formation? Regardless of whether it was Team Sun or the spectating disciples, they were all very puzzled. Yun Chujiu and the others wanted to change the formation? Could it be that they wanted to change the formation into the 5-element sword formation? Wasn't this courting death? They didn't expect that Yun Chujiu and the others actually turned into the 5-element sword formation, while Yun Chujiu and Zhao Hui, who were in the direction of Kaiyang and Yaoguang, were abandoned. Chapter 40-41. Just when everyone was confused, Yun Chujiu and Zhao Hui attacked the lone disciple. When the other disciples of Team Sun wanted to help, they were blocked by Li Zhuangji and the others' 5-element sword formation. Although they were not strong, they could still block for a while. Although the disciple who was alone was panicking, he was not like Liao Tao, who was not prepared. With his own strength, he could hold on until his other companions came to rescue him. Who would have thought that just as he was pondering, he stumbled and was forcefully stabbed by Yun Chujiu's sword into his right arm. Immediately after, Zhao Hu's sword stabbed into his left leg, and then was kicked by Yun Chujiu to the bottom of the competition stage. Everyone was dead silent at first, and then with a buzz, they exploded. Oh my god! They had really opened their eyes. They could actually do this. It had to be said that the Big Dipper battle team was really full of bad ideas. Now that the situation had completely turned around, the Big Dipper battle team had 2 more people than the Sun battle team. They immediately took the initiative, and their chances of winning were very, very high. Those disciples who had bet on the Big Dipper battle team to win were so happy that they almost went crazy. They were rich. This time, they were really rich. In contrast, those who had bet on the Sun battle team to win all had ashen faces. They were so pained that they wished they could go up and help the Sun battle team to turn the tide of the battle. However, to everyone's surprise, the situation on the stage was not one-sided. Instead, it was still evenly matched. Haha, I got it. Although the Big Dipper battle team has 2 more people, their spiritual power is low. As time passes, they won't be able to hold on anymore. Right, what you said makes sense. I think so too. It seems that the final victor is still the Sun battle team. Strength is still the most important. This little trick can only give them a temporary advantage. Elder Duanmu frowned. He had a much sharper eye than those disciples. He could see that Yun Chuzhou and the others did not use their full strength. Instead, they were retracting their attacks. Why was that? Elder Dongfang said in a low voice, "This little girl is so smart that she is as intelligent as a demon. Do you know why she is retracting her attacks?" Elder Duanmu shook his head in annoyance. He hated Elder Dongfang's mystifying methods the most. If there was something to say, just say it. If there was something to say, just say it. There's still 2 hours before the end of today's competition. She's just stalling for time. Think about it. If they ended the battle now, they would definitely be ranked in the top 100, but that would also make them live targets. The disciples ranked outside the top 100 would frantically look for them to challenge them separately. Moreover, they could not refuse. In that case, wouldn't all their previous efforts be wasted? However, once they ran out of time, the top 100 would be set in stone. This little girl is really too smart, Elder Dongfang praised. With such unparalleled wisdom, even if her spiritual power was low, her future would be boundless. Elder Duanmu's mouth was slightly agape. He had to admit that this little girl was really thoughtful. As for why he and Elder Dongfang both thought that this idea was Yun Chuzhiu's, there was no other reason. The main reason was compared to Li Zhuangji and the others, Yun Chuzhou had too many dark histories. Finally, there was only 15 minutes left until the end of the competition. Yun Chuzhou gestured to Li Zhuangji and the others, and everyone understood and stepped up their attacks. Chapter 40-42. Complete victory. Elder Duanmu frowned again and muttered, "Although her plan is very good, she only has 15 minutes left. Can she guarantee that she can defeat her opponent? It's better not to make things worse." To be honest, Elder Dongfang was also a little worried. Once the time for the competition was up and the two sides did not complete the competition, it would be considered as a failure in the challenge. Then it would really be a futile effort. The 5 members of Team Sun saw the light of victory. As long as they gritted their teeth and persevered for another 15 minutes, they would win. Not only would they not lose the position of the top 100, but they would also receive an additional 7 million upper-grade spirit stones. At the thought of this, the 5 of them suddenly burst out with fighting spirit and forcefully withstood the attacks of Yun Chuzhou and the others. The disciples below the stage were simply boiling with excitement. This match was really fucking good-looking. It was simply full of ups and downs and was extremely exciting. This was especially so for those disciples who had placed their bets. All of them clenched their fists and gritted their teeth, wishing that they could go up and fight for the battle team that they supported. Right at this moment, Yun Chuzhou let out a light laugh. Change the formation. Everyone had a dumbfounded expression on their faces. They still wanted to change the formation into the 5-element sword formation? Wasn't this insane? Even the 7-star sword formation couldn't gain the upper hand, but the 5-element sword formation could? However, Yun Chuzhou and the others had actually turned into the 5-element sword formation. Yun Chuzhou and Zhao Hui had been abandoned once again. Was there something wrong with their brains, or did they have other plans? At this moment, Yun Chuzhou and Zhao Hui moved. They raised their swords and attacked a disciple of the Sun Battle Team. That disciple was standing in the direction of the wooden seat. The water seat disciple rushed over to help. However, the Big Dipper Battle Team took advantage of the moment when the water seat disciple lost his seat to find the weakness of the Sun Battle Team and completely dismantled their 5-element sword formation. Elder Duanmu stood up abruptly. Although he was shocked by Yun Chuzhou's intelligence this time, he was truly shocked. Although the 5-element sword array was the lowest level sword array in the Nameless Sword Sect, it was still shocking that it was broken in just one move. Elder Dongfang did not stand up, but the shock in his heart was not any less than Elder Duanmu's. To be able to think of this method to break the array, it was obvious that she had studied the 5-element sword array very thoroughly. Most importantly, she had calculated the enemy's reaction. In other words, this was also a gamble. If the disciples of the water level didn't help the disciples of the wooden level, the disciples of the wooden level wouldn't have done anything. This was because Yun Chuzhou and Zhao Hui were simply feigning their attacks. Their goal was to make the disciples of the water level lose their positions. At this moment, the 5 members of Team Sun were completely cut off from each other. Almost instantly, one of the disciples was kicked off the stage. The defeat was like the collapse of a mountain. The remaining 4 disciples had completely lost their fighting spirit. Yun Chujio and the others did not expend much energy and kicked them off the stage as well. The Big Dipper battle team had won completely. There was a deathly silence below the stage at first. Then there was an explosion of cheers. Of course, the cheers were pitifully few. Basically, it was all from the disciples who had bet on Yun Chujio and the others to win. The faces of Liao Tao and the other 7 turned pale. Liao Tao gritted his teeth and said, "This doesn't count. The competition stage has always been a one-on-one fight, so we can only count this as a gamble. At worst, we can just compensate you with 7 million upper-grade spirit stones, but we can't let you guys get into the top 100. The other 6 people also echoed, and now they would rather sacrifice their wealth to protect their positions in the top 100. Some of the disciples who lost money felt indignant, so they also agreed, and for a time it was chaotic. Chapter 40-43 was too shameless. Zhao Hui and the others were still in the ecstasy of victory, but when they saw it, they were instantly dumbfounded. Li Zhuangji gnashed his teeth and said, "Liao Tao, you guys are too shameless. We agreed at that time that as long as we won, our rankings would be swapped. How can you not keep your word?" A trace of guilt flashed across Liao Tao's face. It was fine if it was a normal month, but this month's ranking was related to the Eye of Sword intent, so he couldn't care too much. Thus, he immediately said, "I've never said that. I mean, if we lose, it'll give you 7 million upper-grade spirit stones." Li Zhuangji wanted to say more, but he heard Yun Chujio say, "All right, you can transfer the 7 million upper-grade spirit stones to me now." Li Zhuangji and the others were so shocked that their eyeballs almost fell off. It's over. Junior sister Yun has gone crazy again. Liao Tao and the others were so happy that they almost went crazy. Haha, this Yun Chujio was indeed a country bumpkin. She definitely didn't know the preciousness of the Eye of Sword intent slot and actually chose 7 million upper-grade spirit stones. Since that was the case, what was there to hesitate about? Thus, Liao Tao and the others immediately transferred 1 million upper-grade spirit stones to Yun Chujio. Elder Duanmu wanted to stop them, but Liao Tao and the others were too fast. He didn't have the time to stop them, and his expression immediately turned ugly. He thought that this little girl had a bright future. But now, it was obvious that she was an ignorant money grubber. At this moment, he saw Yun Chujio walk to the side of the competition manager with a smile. "Manager Gao, please re-register the ranking information for us. In the team leader of the Big Dipper battle team, so it'll replace Liao Tao's 65th place. As for the others, they'll be ranked according to their size. You can register them as you see fit." Manager Gao was completely dumbfounded. Let's not talk about whether they would be ranked according to their size first. The main point was that he had already promised Liao Tao not to change the ranking. Didn't you already accept 7 million high-grade spirit stones from them? Liao Tao and the other 3 were also anxious. Liao Tao said exasperatedly, "Yun Chujio, you already accepted our spirit stones. Why do you still want to change the ranking? You can't go back on your words." Yun Chujio spread her hands and said with a chuckle, "You probably have a bad memory, right? Did I say that I would give up on changing the ranking just because I accepted your spirit stones? You guys want to give us spirit stones, but I'm not stupid, so of course I won't refuse. Are you blaming me?" Liao Tao and the other 3 were almost angered to death by Yun Chujio's words. Yun Chujio was obviously tricking them. Moreover, she was giving them a taste of their own medicine. It was too fucking infuriating. Too damn shameless. Only then did Li Zhuangji and the others come to their senses. They had been scared out of their wits just now and thought that junior sister Yun had gone crazy again. Liao Tao and the others naturally would not be at a disadvantage. They clamored to put pressure on Manager Gao, hoping that he would not change the ranking information for Yun Chujio and the others. At this moment, Elder Duanmu let out a long cough filled with pressure, and the entire venue instantly fell silent. Since you have entered the competition stage, you have tacitly agreed to the rules of the competition stage. Since you have lost, you have to keep your promise. If you can't even do this, you are not worthy to be a disciple of our nameless sword sect. After Elder Duanmu finished speaking, he flicked his sleeves and left the competition stage. Elder Dongfang smiled and nodded at Yun Chujio. Then, he also left the competition stage. Manager Gao naturally didn't dare to offend Elder Duanmu. Besides, Liao Tao and the others were unreasonable in the first place, so he quickly helped Yun Chujio and the others to register the changes in their rankings. Chapter 4044 turned out to be intentional. When Liao Tao and the others saw that the outcome was set, they immediately became like quails that had lost the battle. Not only did they lose their ranking, but they also lost 1,000,000 upper-grade spirit stones each. They simply did not want to live anymore. Liao Tao looked at the smiling Yun Chujio on the stage with resentment. He did not blame himself for going on the stage because of greed. He did not blame himself for being inferior to others, but he blamed Yun Chujio for being full of bad ideas. He rolled his eyes, and suddenly his eyes lit up. He said to the surrounding disciples, "Fellow disciples, Yun Chujio and the other 7 are now ranked within the top 100. As long as you succeed in your challenge, this good ranking will be yours. This is a once-in-lifetime opportunity. You must not miss it." The other disciples suddenly woke up from their dreams. They immediately rushed to Manager Gao's side, clamoring about their challenger. It was none other than to challenge one of Yun Chujio's people. This was a great opportunity to obtain the qualifications to go to the Eye of Sword Intent. If they didn't grasp it, they would be a fool. However, Manager Gao's words instantly turned the heat in their hearts into ice. It was like pulling out a cold blade. This month's competition time has already ended. If you want a challenge, please come early next month, Manager Gao said coldly. The crowd was silent for quite a while because of these words. Finally, someone shouted, "Fuck, no wonder the Big Dipper battle team didn't have the advantage when it was a 7 versus 5 match on the stage. It turns out that they did it on purpose. They're just stalling for time." When this person said this, everyone came to a sudden realization. They all started to curse out loud in anger. On one hand, they were cursing at Yun Chujio and the others for being too sarcastic. On the other hand, they were ridiculing Liao Tao and the others for being utterly stupid. They actually didn't even see through Yun Chujio's trick, forcefully wasting their chance to challenge again. Liao Tao and the others were so angry that they almost fainted. They were also victims, alright. These idiots actually still blamed them. However, Li Zhuangji, Zhao Hui, and the others were laughing so hard that they couldn't close their mouths. Not only did they obtain the qualifications to use the Eye of Sword Intent, but they also made a huge profit from the bet, not to mention the 7 million spirit stones that junior sister Yun had swindled. Haha, they were rich. However, Yun Chujio looked at them lightly and said, "I'll take those spirit stones as repayment. Don't forget that you still owe me money." Li Zhuangji and the others immediately became listless. However, when they thought about the qualifications to use the Eye of Sword Intent, they immediately threw these worldly possessions out of their minds. Compared to the qualifications to use the Eye of Sword Intent, spirit stones were nothing. After Li Zhuangji and the others accompanied Yun Chujio to the gambling house to exchange for spirit stones, they chatted and laughed as they walked towards the dining hall. Since they were happy today, they naturally wanted to have a good meal. Liao Tao and the others gritted their teeth as they looked at the backs of Yun Chujio and the others. They wished they could pounce on them and take a few bites. However, due to the sect rules, they could only endure it. In their hearts, they decided to wait until the next month's competition to make Yun Chujio and the others pay the price. Yun Chujio, Li Zhuangji, and the others ate and drank for a while before returning to their dormitories. After returning to their dormitories, Yun Chujio said to the drifters who followed closely behind, "I will go to the Eye of Sword Intent the day after tomorrow. You guys will watch over my house obediently, understand?" These few days, when Li Zhuangji and the others were fiddling with the sword array in Yun Chujio's courtyard, The drifters were eager to cause trouble. However, when they saw the mountain-like pile of Buddhist scriptures on the stone table, they had no choice but to restrain themselves. They only occasionally allowed Li Zhuangji and the others to fall or something like that, so they did not do anything worse. Now that they heard that Yun Shujio was actually going to leave again, the drifters were even more unhappy. Chapter 40-45 brought the drifters along. The drifters jumped around randomly for a while, indicating that they were protesting. However, Yun Shujio did not fall for their tricks at all and turned around to enter the house. On the morning that Yun Shujio left the house, as expected, Yun Shujio saw 3 puppet plates on the stone table. Yun Shujio immediately revealed a sinister smile. "Drifters, you must be hiding in the puppet plates now. How about I put you in my storage ring and never let you out? Isn't it wonderful?" The drifters were so angry that they almost fainted. Wonderful? They were so angry that they almost died. The drifters immediately floated out of the 3 puppet discs, afraid that Yun Shujio would really trap them forever. Yun Shujio curled her lips. "Look at your cowardice. I was just scaring you. I'll give you one more chance. If you don't go in, I'll leave." The drifters hesitated for a moment, but they still went into the 3 puppet discs. Yun Shujio put the puppet discs into her storage ring and wondered why these drifters were so fond of her. Why did they have to follow her out? She felt that it was not bad to bring these drifters along. They might be useful at critical moments. Putting everything else aside, it was not bad to create a 7-star sword formation at critical moments. It was not that she had not thought of teaching Zhao Hui and the others the 7-star sword formation, but to be honest, she still did not have complete trust in them. The origin of the 7-star sword formation could not be explained clearly, so she did not plan to tell them for the time being. However, after returning from the Eye of Sword Intent, she could say that she had comprehended it there. When that time came, she would be able to clear her name. Yun Shujio pondered as she walked to the meeting point. Although it was a rare opportunity to go to the Eye of Sword Intent, the Nameless Sword sect couldn't be left unguarded. Hence, Master Ouyang brought a few elders to stay behind and let Elder Duanmu and Elder Wan lead the team. If it was in the past, Master Ouyang would definitely not be at ease to let Elder Duanmu and Elder Wan go together. However, for some reason, Elder Duanmu's relationship with Elder Wan had become estranged recently. Instead, he had more interactions with Elder Dongfang, whom he had never gotten along with before. Master Ouyang also received a report that Yun Shujio had been going to Elder Duanmu's courtyard frequently recently. He had a vague guess in his heart, so he was at ease letting the 2 of them lead the team. Someone had to stay behind to guard the sword forging hall, so Master Ouyang let Elder Dongfang stay in the sect. After everyone had arrived, Master Ouyang said a few words. It was nothing more than to cherish this rare opportunity and not waste Yun. After Master Ouyang finished speaking, Elder Wan and Elder Duanmu each said a few more words. It was nothing more than emphasizing the rules of the way and entering the Eye of Sword Intent. They were not allowed to stir up trouble. Finally, the 3 of them finished speaking. Only then did everyone board the flying spirit tool under Master Ouyang's eager gaze and head to the Eye of Sword Intent. The inner disciples were all arranged in a cabin and gathered together in groups of 2 or 3. Yun Shujio saw Zhang Li standing alone at the side, so she went over to greet him. Zhang Li had been living in seclusion recently. Other than directly challenging a contestant ranked 50 on the last day of the competition, there was no other news about him. The result of the challenge was naturally without suspense. Although Zhang Li had been abandoned for a few years, he was still a successor disciple after all. Not to mention challenging a disciple ranked 50, even a disciple ranked 5th was basically no problem. Chapter 40-46. When Zhang Li saw Yun Shujio coming over, he smiled and nodded. Although he had a good impression of Yun Shujio, the age difference was quite big. Unlike Zhao Hui and the others who were always together with Yun Shujio, he had a feeling that the friendship between gentlemen was as light as water. When Yun Shujio and the others were competing, he was also watching from below the stage. He was quite emotional. If he had the scheming mind of this little girl, he would not have fallen to this stage. Although Li Zhuangji and the others did not have a good impression of Zhang Li in the past, and they had even ridiculed Zhang Li together with others, it was as if they had lost their memories now. They also followed closely behind Yun Chujiu and called him Martial Uncle Zhang. It was so affectionate. Wan Pengcheng saw this situation and curled his lips. He said to the few lackeys beside him, "Birds of a feather flock together. People flock together. Trash and trash can always come together. Some people, although they have the right to go to the Eye of Sword Intent, it's a waste to go there. They definitely won't be able to comprehend anything." What a waste of the quota. The few people beside Wan Pengcheng immediately echoed. They all knew about the conflict between Wan Pengcheng and Yun Chujiu. In addition, Elder Wan was leading the team this time, so they naturally had no scruples. Their words were very harsh. Li Zhuangji and the others' expressions suddenly became a little ugly. Only Yun Chujiu's expression remained the same. She said to them lightly, "They are talking about themselves. Why are you all joining in the fun?" Li Zhuangji and the others were stunned, and then laughed. Junior Sister Yun's words were really sarcastic. She did not even use any dirty words when she cursed. After Wan Pengcheng heard it, he immediately stood up and walked in front of Yun Chujiu and the others. "Yun Chujiu, who are you talking about?" Yun Chujiu laughed lightly. "You want to fight? Fine, come on. I want to see how Elder Wan will protect a grandson like you." Yun Chujiu's words caused Li Zhuangji and the others to burst into laughter. Wasn't she just a grandson? There was nothing wrong with her. Wan Pengcheng was so angry that his face turned red. Just as he was about to make a move, he was pulled back by the people beside him. Before coming, Elder Wan and Elder Duanmu had specially emphasized that fighting was not allowed. If there was any violation, they would immediately disqualify him from removing the Eye of Sword Intent. Wan Pengcheng thought of the seriousness of the matter and could only clench his teeth. "Yun Chujiu, just you wait. We're not done yet." Yun Chujiu did not even look at him. If Elder Wan did not support such an idiot, she could kill him 10,000 times. In the next few days, Wan Pengcheng and the others did not stop hurling insults at each other. However, every time they were whipped by Yun Chujiu, they eventually shut up. Zhao Hui lowered his voice and said, "Junior Sister Yun, you have offended Wan Pengcheng. I'm afraid that after entering the Eye of Sword Intent, he will cause some trouble." Yun Chujiu chuckled and said, "Even if there isn't such a thing, do you think Elder Wan will let us off easily? Besides, isn't the Eye of Sword Intent to comprehend sword intent? What else can he do to us?" Zhao Hui thought about it and agreed. It was said that the Eye of Sword Intent had a designated area. The major forces only needed to meditate within their respective areas, so there was nothing to worry about. A few days later, the flying spirit tool landed in a valley. The people from the other major forces, including the 9-storied pavilion, had already arrived. Yun Chujiu secretly glanced around but did not see Tower Master Luochen. She immediately heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed that the pretty boy had hurt him badly. What the fuck? It would be better if he died directly. Chapter 40-47. I placed your husband on a tree. Just as Yun Chujiu was thinking about it, she felt a resentful gaze. She didn't care too much about it. After all, this fellow had offended too many people. She could just glare at him, if she wanted to. If she had the ability, she could stare until the seas dried up and the rocks rotted. However, she felt that this resentful gaze seemed to have shot over from another sect, so she turned her head to look and saw a young girl wearing light yellow clothes glaring at her fiercely. Yun Chujiu was amused. Wasn't this the Xiaoyu from the Flying Flower Island? Back then, in order to humiliate her in front of Tower Master Luochen, this little bitch had specially proposed a sword competition with her. In the end, she relied on the sinking pulp sword to gain the upper hand, but she was struck by Tower Master Luchen's palm and nearly died from anger. When Xiaoyu saw Yun Chujiu looking at her, her gaze became even colder, but she never expected that Yun Chujiu would actually give her a brilliant smile and even wave her claws. if it wasn't for the fact that she had no way of leaving the team. This fellow would even run over to exchange a few words of greetings. Xiao Yu instantly felt her heart become even more stifled. It was as though she had used all her strength to smash her fist onto cotton, causing her to feel an unspeakable grievance. Yun Chujio looked at Xiao Yu's fuming expression, and just as she was feeling pleased in her heart, the voice transmission talisman in her storage ring started to tremble. Yun Chujio was very puzzled. Who sent her the voice transmission talisman? Could it be Yun Jichen and Prime Minister Sima? Didn't make sense. Currently, the Atlas Empire was developing very smoothly under her remote control. Before she came out, she had specially instructed them not to contact her for the next few days. Could it be that something had happened? Yun Chujio took out the voice transmission talisman from her storage ring somewhat apprehensively, but when she discovered that it was sent by Xue Wuji, she was even more puzzled. Xue Wuji couldn't use the voice transmission talisman where he followed the pretty boy. Could it be that he had returned to the northern continent? After Yun Chujio sent her spiritual sense in, Xue Wuji's cheeky voice came from inside. Little sister Jiao, I put your fiancé on a tree 1,000 feet away from you. Remember to get it. Yun Chujio, what did he mean by putting her fiancé on a tree? Why did he sound so strange? Yun Chujio said unhappily. Explain it clearly. What exactly is going on? Little sister Jiao, I'm following orders. You can ask that facial paralysis person about the specifics. I still have things to do. See you later. Yun Chujio was so angry that she gritted her teeth, but she couldn't really ignore it. Therefore, she clutched her stomach and moved closer to Elder Duanmu. Io, Elder Duanmu, my stomach hurts. I need to go to the toilet. Elder Duanmu, more than half of her good impression of Yun Chujio suddenly disappeared. What was wrong with the girl? Cultivators were different from ordinary people. The food they ate contained spiritual qi, and most of it could be absorbed by the body. Even if it wasn't absorbed, as long as they controlled it properly, it wouldn't be solved for a long time. Moreover, since they knew that they were going to use the Eye of Sword intent, many people ate fasting pills in advance. How could a heartless person like her have a bad stomach? Although Elder Duamus' expression was very ugly, he could not stop her from going. He could only harumph coldly and say, hurry back. If you miss the time to enter the Eye of Sword intent, you will regret it. Okay. Yun Chujio hurriedly agreed. She clutched her stomach and dived into the small forest 1,000 feet away. This fellow glanced around with shifty eyes and soon discovered a small silver-white snake coiled on a branch. She finally understood why Xue Wuji said that he had placed D Biming on the tree. Damn it, how did he turn into a snake again? Was he addicted to shape-shifting? Chapter 40-48 fell to the ground when the small silver snake saw Yun Chujio's dumbfounded look. It couldn't help but close its eyes. Out of sight, out of mind. Yun Chujio was stunned for a moment. Then, she picked up the small silver snake's tail, and a certain one pitifully turned upside down. Yun Chujio lowered her voice and said, What's going on? Why did you turn into a snake again? Did you seal it too much again? Or do you think it's good to be a snake? A certain being squeezed out 2 sentences from between his teeth. The Eye of Sword essence has the bones that I need. I can only sneak in by turning into this. Yun Chujio suddenly realized. She had said it before. The pretty boy was the most desperate to save face and suffer. If it was not a last resort, he would not have become like this. However, Yun Chujio was still a little puzzled. That's not right. Why don't you just let me help you find it? You don't have to come here personally. You can't find the exact location of the bone. You can only find it if I come here personally, a certain being said coldly. However, a trace of embarrassment flashed across his vertical pupils. As Yun Chujio was holding the small silver snake upside down, she did not notice the gaze of a certain being. She immediately believed it. However, this fellow shone brightly just by giving him a little sunlight. She immediately shook the small silver snake in her hand and said slyly, "Tsk, Iske. Little baby, when you recovered your human body, you made me suffer a lot. Now that you have fallen into my hands, do you think I should torture you or torture you? A certain lord gritted his teeth. He knew it would be like this. Little Joe, I can recover my human body at any time. Don't go too far. Hei Xinjiu immediately shrank her neck. That's right. This time, her pretty boy turned into a snake as a temporary measure. It was better for her to restrain herself. Therefore, she smiled obsequiously. Prince Charming, I'm just teasing you. The other side is urging me. I'll invite you into the bedroom now. You can rest first. Just as a certain someone was wondering about the bedroom, Hei Xinjiu threw him into her sleeve pocket. A certain someone, Yun Chujio, returned to the team eagerly. Elder Duanmu glared at her fiercely. Hei Xinjiu bared her little white teeth and smiled brightly, which made Elder Duanmu's hair stand on end. This little girl was in such a bad mood. Why did she look so happy? Soon it was time to open the Eye of Sword Intent. A barrier that looked like water ripples appeared in the center of the six forces. As the six forces had made an agreement long ago, and there was a corresponding area of influence, it was orderly. There was no competition. Yun Chujio was a little nervous. First of all, she knew that she was a troublemaker, especially since the weapon spirit did not want to see her, and Qi Ling did not want to see her. Second of all, she had a gigolo in her sleeve pocket. She did not know if there would be any problems. Fortunately, when it was her turn, nothing unusual happened. She smoothly followed everyone into the Eye of Sword Intent. As soon as she entered the Eye of Sword Intent, Yun Chujio did not even have time to look around before she fell to the ground, instantly becoming the focus of everyone's attention. If it were an ordinary person, they would definitely be embarrassed and would wish they could find a hole to hide in. However, Hei Xinjiu had never taken the normal path. Just as Wan Pengcheng and the others wanted to laugh at her, this fellow knelt on the ground and muttered a few words before standing up. Everyone was confused by this fellow. Could it be that she didn't fall just now, but that there was something fishy about it? Chapter 40-49 bounced like a rabbit. Elder Duanmu glanced at Yun Chujio and asked, "What's going on?" Yun Chujio said with a solemn face, "Elder Duanmu, when I entered the Eye of Sword Intent just now, I felt the majestic and ancient power of the Sword Intent, so I couldn't help but kneel down and worship it. It must be the Sword Intent calling me. I'm so honored." Elder Duanmu's expression immediately eased up a lot. This little girl seemed to be very sensitive to the Sword Intent. Perhaps there would be good fortune in the Eye of Sword Intent. He nodded slightly at the thought and signaled for everyone to continue walking in. Yun Chujio didn't care about the envious, suspicious, or mocking gazes of the crowd. Instead, she cursed in her heart, "Damn it, which old bastard did this? It can't be the Qi Ling, right?" She squinted her eyes and looked around. Her pupils suddenly constricted because she saw a faint red mist drifting towards her feet.
Damn. No wonder she fell down all of a sudden.
So, it was this thing that did this. Although she did not dare to be very sure, this thing was exactly the same as the drifter in her courtyard. Perhaps it was also filled with killing intent. Moreover, this trick was the same as the drifter's trick to tease Zhao Hui and the others. All the people in the world were related by blood, so they must be drifters too. Just as Yun Chujio was thinking about it, the faint, almost invisible red mist had already blocked her feet. If she walked forward at her normal pace, she would definitely fall again. Yun Chujio blinked her eyes and deliberately stopped moving. Wan Pengcheng, who was standing behind her, immediately said unhappily, "Hurry up and move." The order of the inner sect disciples' movements was arranged according to the ranking of the Proclamation of Azure Sky. Wan Pengcheng was ranked 66th on the Proclamation of Azure Sky, but Yun Chujio had replaced Liao Tao to become 65th, so she was ranked ahead of him. Wan Pengcheng was already very angry because of this, so he naturally wanted to find fault. Yun Chujio blinked her eyes and stood directly behind Wan Pengcheng. "Senior brother Wan, you go ahead." Wan Pengcheng was stunned, but he thought that Yun Chujio was afraid of him. He immediately sneered and then raised his leg to step forward.
Bang!
Wan Pengcheng really fell like a dog, gnawing on mud. Moreover, he was very pleased with himself previously. He held his head high and puffed out his chest, so the fall was especially tragic. Wan Pengcheng did not have Yun Chujia's talent in acting. He was stunned at that moment. He lay on the ground and did not get up for a long time. Instantly, everyone's eyes were focused on him. He climbed up with a red face and a thick neck. He turned his head and roared at Yun Chujio. Yun Chujio, was it you who played a trick? You're courting death. Yun Chujio shivered and said innocently, Senior Brother Wan, I was kind enough to let you walk in front. How is it a trick? Besides, we are fellow disciples. It's not good to shout and fight, right? Wan Pengcheng wanted to say more, but Elder Wan glared at him. Keep quiet. If anyone makes any more noise, just stay here. Don't go any further. Wan Pengcheng could only look at Yun Chujio with resentment and then continue to walk. Yun Chujio curled the corners of her lips and continued to walk. Soon, she found that there was a drifter in front of her, trying to trip her. She simply jumped forward and avoided the drifter. The drifter was obviously unwilling to give up and kept creating obstacles for her. Therefore, everyone was stunned to see that Yun Chujio was not walking properly, but was jumping around like a rabbit. Chapter 40-50. Floating drags the corners of Zhao Hui, and the other's eyes twitched. Junior sister Yun, have you gone mad again? Elder Duanmu glared at Yun Chujio fiercely, but Yun Chujio continued to hop around as if she hadn't seen anything. This fellow's heart was also bitter. She didn't want to hop around like this, but if she didn't hop around, she would fall very unsightly, okay? The drifter in the eye of sword intent was obviously much more arrogant than the one in her courtyard. There were so many cultivators here, but they still dared to come out and play tricks. They were simply unscrupulous. Yun Chujio had the intention to take out the relic to scare the drifter away, but the pretty boy had once told her that the relic was very eye-catching, and it was best not to let others see it. So, she could only continue to hop around. Because this guy had to be careful of the drifter under his feet, he did not even have the chance to see the scenery. It was only when the team stopped temporarily that she had the chance to look around. With one look, she could not help but be greatly shocked. In the distance, there was a huge sword that pierced straight into the ground. Although it was still far away, she could still feel the biting cold air brought by the huge sword. Yun Chujio's entire mind was shocked by the huge sword. It was not easy for her to withdraw her gaze before she started to look at her surroundings. This place could almost be described as a barren land. Other than the humans who had entered, there were no signs of life. There was not even a breeze. It was as if time had stopped here. Yun Chujio wanted to ask Di Biming about the bones. However, she realized that although Di Biming had turned into a small silver snake, he was not her spiritual pet. Furthermore, talismans were prohibited here. It was really inconvenient for the two of them to communicate. Yun Chujio could only temporarily give up the idea of communicating with Di Biming and began to search for those messy drifters. If Yun Chujio had not seen the murderous aura in the past, she would not have noticed that there were threads of drifters shuttling through the crowd. However, those drifters did not seem to have any bad intentions towards the others. Instead, they seemed to be playing around. Yun Chujio cursed in her heart when she saw this. It seemed like these shameless drifters were only targeting her. Could it be that she had dug up their ancestral graves in her previous life? Just as Yun Chujio was cursing in her heart, the team moved forward again. The reason why they stopped just now was because the 6 major forces had once again confirmed their respective areas of influence. Seeing that the huge sword was very close to them, they had to walk for more than half a day before they reached the huge sword. Yun Chujio couldn't help but look up. She felt that the giant sword seemed to go straight to the clouds. If she didn't know that it was a treasure sword, people would really think that it was a mountain that towered into the clouds. For a time, everyone was intimidated by the giant sword. Even the cultivators who had been here before were shocked again. Finally, the elders leading the teams from the major forces came back to their senses and ordered everyone to sit cross-legged and meditate according to the order. They had to seize the time to comprehend the sword intent. Everyone knew that this was an opportunity that could not be missed. Hence, they all began to meditate devoutly. They calmed their hearts and focused their minds. They felt the sharp aura on the giant sword and hoped that they could comprehend it. As there were elders and successive disciples in front of them, Yun Chujio was ranked lower among the inner disciples. Therefore, she was basically at the end of the group. This fellow closed her eyes and was about to comprehend the sword intent when she suddenly opened her eyes. This was because she realized that there were a few wisps of drifters that were trying to jump into her forehead with ill intentions. Hei Shinjio was so angry. They were trying to find trouble with her in good faith, weren't they? Drifters and dregs, just you wait. Chapter 4051. The buzzing sound. Hei Shinju secretly took out a thick stack of Buddhist scriptures from her storage ring and placed them in front, back, left, and right of her. There was even a large string of Buddhist beads. The drifters were obviously afraid of these things and left unwillingly. Yun Chujio pursed her lips. She had fought with the drifters for a very long time, and these new drifters still wanted to bully her? In her dreams. However, with this torment, the little emotions that this fellow had been brewing had mostly disappeared, and he could no longer calm down and concentrate. This fellow knew that he could not force himself to comprehend the sword intent, so he simply stuck his claws into his sleeve pocket and poked. A certain one was so embarrassed and angry that he wished he could bite off this fellow's claws. Just as Yun Chujio was enjoying herself, the drifters returned. There were even more of them than before. Yun Chujio gritted her teeth. Were these drifters not afraid of being discovered by others? She turned around and looked around. Everyone was closing their eyes to comprehend the sword intent, so these drifters had nothing to fear. Yun Chujio had no choice but to take out the relic from her storage ring. The drifters immediately ran away in a panic. It was obvious that they were afraid of the relic in Yun Chujio's hands. Yun Chujio pursed her lips. If the tiger did not show its power, did it really think that she was a sick cat? It would be better to scare these drifters to death. Just as this guy was enjoying himself, the huge sword emitted a slightly sharp buzzing sound, which scared all the people who were closing their eyes to comprehend the sword intent to open their eyes. Hei Shinjio was so scared that she shivered, too. The relic in her hand almost fell to the ground. The guy quickly put it back into his storage ring. All of a sudden, everybody exploded. What's wrong with the giant sword? Nothing like this has ever happened before. Is there something wrong?
Yeah.
It's really unusual. How could it be like this? It won't delay our comprehension of the sword intent, will it? Delaying our comprehension of sword intent is a small matter, but please don't let it be a disaster. Listening to everyone's discussion, Hei Shinjio inexplicably felt a little guilty. It couldn't be related to the relic she took out, right? This guy was afraid of being suspected, so he hurriedly put away the Buddhist scriptures beside him into his storage ring. Unfortunately, Wan Pengcheng saw her collecting the Buddhist scriptures, so he immediately reported it to Elder Wan. Yun Chujio once again became the focus of everyone's attention. Although she felt a little guilty, she still looked calm on the surface. She took out a few Buddhist scriptures and said, "That's right. I did take out the Buddhist scriptures, but I just wanted to use the Buddhist scriptures to quickly calm my mind. Is there a problem? If there's a problem, I took it out now. The huge sword should also make a sound, but isn't there anything unusual now?" Everyone actually felt that there was nothing wrong with it. It was just a Buddhist scripture. How could it affect the huge sword? That Wan Pengcheng really had nothing to do. However, at this moment, the huge sword once again made a buzzing sound. Yun Chujio, damn it, this thing was done on purpose, right? Previously, she had placed the Buddhist scripture for a long time and did not see it call out. Why did it call out now? Wan Pengcheng looked at Yun Chujio proudly, thinking to himself, damn girl, you're going to be in trouble. As expected, everyone looked at Yun Chujio with resentment. So, it was really her who caused it. It was really too detestable. Wasn't this delaying them from comprehending the sword intent? Wan Pengcheng immediately snatched the Buddhist scripture from Yun Chujia's hand. He waved the treasured sword in his hand a few times, and the few Buddhist scriptures instantly turned into dust on the ground. Chapter 4052. Where are the bones? Almost at the moment when the Buddhist scriptures were destroyed, the humming of the huge sword stopped. This time, everyone was even more certain that it was because of these Buddhist scriptures. Elder Wan said in a businesslike tone, Yun Chujio, although you didn't mean it, you have already delayed everyone's comprehension of sword intent. Even if you are a disciple of our nameless sword sect, you can't go unpunished. Immediately retreat 5 miles away to reflect on your actions. The time limit is 2 days. Do you have any objections? Elder Duanmus' brows were tightly knitted. Just as he was about to plead on Yun Chujio's behalf, he heard Yun Chujio say crisply, I admit my mistake. I admit my punishment. Elder Duanmu was furious. Was this little girl's brain damaged? She had spent so much effort to obtain a spot, and it was wasted just like that. One had to know that the closer one was to the giant sword, the better the effect of comprehension. If one retreated 5 miles away, what use would it be? However, Yun Chujio's words had already left his mouth, so he naturally could not say anything more. He calculated in his heart that if it really did not work, he would think of a way to excuse her tomorrow morning. Zhao Hui and the others all looked at Yun Chujio worriedly, but they could not help much. They could only watch as Yun Chujio left the team with her head drooping. She walked until she was 5 miles away and sat cross-legged on the ground. Time was precious. After this small episode, everyone continued to sit cross-legged and comprehend the sword intent. Hei Shinju lowered her voice and said to the small silver snake in her sleeve, Little baby, I sacrificed a lot for you. Otherwise, I wouldn't have retreated here, so stupidly. Hearing the words little baby, a certain god could not help but tremble. He gritted his teeth and said, Speak properly. Although Yun Chuju still wanted to take advantage of him verbally, when she thought that Di Baiming could recover at any time, her expression immediately changed. Prince Charming, I'm joking with you. He, isn't it very funny? The little silver snake snorted coldly and ignored her. This fellow laughed a few times in embarrassment and said, There were too many people there just now, so we couldn't communicate. Now that I've been punished to this place, we can use this opportunity to chat. My dearest Prince Charming, where is the bone you mentioned? Anyway, I've been punished, so no one cares about me even if I wander around. Seeing Yun Chujio being so obsequious, a certain one immediately felt much better and said in a relaxed tone, The location of the bone is a bit special. You can't get it now, so you need to wait for the opportunity. Yun Chujio immediately straightened her back unwillingly. Prince Charming, you're underestimating me too much. Although I'm not as powerful as you, I didn't give it to you for nothing. Just tell me where the bone is, and I promise to dig it out for you. A certain someone said faintly, The bone is under the giant sword. Yun Chujio, are you fucking kidding me? Under the giant sword? If she ran to dig the bone under the giant sword, she would definitely be beaten to a pulp. Wasn't this provoking the public's anger? Yun Chujio was stunned for a moment, but she had already said her big words, so she couldn't just admit defeat, right? Hence, this fellow pretended to not care and said, All right. Isn't it just under the giant sword? No problem. I promise to help you get the bone. A certain someone didn't say anything. He knew that it was a little difficult. Moreover, he hadn't thought of how to quietly get the bone. If it wasn't for the slight mistake, he could have forcefully taken the bone with his spiritual power. However, now he could only act according to the situation. Chapter 4053 was shy again. Although Hei Xinjia's words were loud and clear, she was so worried that she wanted to bang her head against the wall. This was an impossible mission, okay? Could it be that she said to those people, Excuse me, I want to dig something out from under the giant sword? She would probably be beaten flat before she could finish her words. These people treated the giant sword as their ancestor. Forget about digging under the giant sword, they couldn't even get close to it. Fortunately, the Eye of Sword intent would be open for 10 days, so there was still time to slowly plan. This guy had always been a big-hearted person. After worrying for a while, he secretly began to tease a certain god. Prince Charming, you said that you came to get the bone. Why do I feel that you miss me too much? Did you find an excuse to travel so much and rush here, because you couldn't bear the pain of missing me? You said that you would come, so you came. You even deliberately turned into a small silver snake. Are you trying to steal a kiss from me again? The small silver snake's body was suffused with a faint pink color, he said with some embarrassment and annoyance. Nonsense. This venerable one is here to take the bones. If you don't have a way to take the bones for the time being, then quickly comprehend the sword intent. Don't waste the opportunity. Yun Chujo curled her lips. Whenever the pretty boy was shy, he would say, this venerable one. He was just a paper tiger. However, what he said made sense. It was not easy for her to enter the Eye of Sword will, so she did not want to waste it. Therefore, Yun Chujo calmed her breath and focused her mind, wanting to comprehend the sword will. However, before she could close her eyes, she saw a few drifters floating over sneakily, and they looked quite smug. Yun Chujo wanted to take out the Buddhist scriptures and relics, but she was afraid that the giant sword would call out again. She could only grit her teeth and curse softly. Get lost. If you come near me again, I will kill you. Those drifters would not be threatened by her. They all moved closer to Yun Chujo's glabella. Yun Chujo had no choice but to take out the relics again. The drifters immediately scattered like birds and beasts. Unfortunately, the giant sword made a buzzing sound again. Everyone turned to look at Yun Chujo at the same time. Although Yun Chujo felt guilty, she looked innocent on the surface. No one saw her take out the Buddhist scriptures anyway. What else could they do to her? However, she had underestimated the greed of those people for the sword intent. Soon, a few disciples ran over and said to her, Yun Chujo, Elder One wants you to step back another 5 miles. If you defy him, you can only be forcefully brought over. Yun Chujo had every reason to believe that if she did not do as they said, they would really bring her over. However, it was also good to be further away. She could just deal with those drifters. Thus, she said with an aggrieved expression, all right, although I really did not do anything, I will follow Elder Wan's arrangements. After Yun Chujo finished speaking, she covered her face and ran away. Moreover, the distance she ran was more than 5 miles. Her figure shrunk into a small black, in front of everyone's eyes. Although a few people sympathized with Yun Chujo, most people felt that she deserved it. No one paid attention to her anymore. They were all focused on comprehending the sword intent. Yun Chujo ran to a safe distance and gritted her teeth. If it weren't for those drifters, she wouldn't have been ostracized by everyone. Damn it, I have to teach them a lesson today. The little silver snake in her sleeve pocket said worriedly, Little Joe, you can't use Buddhist scriptures and relics. How are you going to teach those murderous auras a lesson? Chapter 4054. The reason for the humming of the giant sword. Hei Shinjo revealed a sinister smile and said fiercely, Scare them to death. Di Baiming was at a loss. Scare them to death. Are you sure you are not talking nonsense? Soon, a few drifters came over. Yun Chujo immediately pointed at the sky and cursed, Tian Dao, you old bastard. Get out here now. Did you release these drifters? Quickly put these drifters away, or I will scold you 8 times a day. Those few drifters were so shocked that they almost couldn't even drift. There was actually someone in this world who dared to scold Tian Dao. Wasn't this courting death? It didn't matter if she was courting death, but if she attracted the heavenly lightning, wouldn't it implicate them? Thus, those few drifters stumbled and drifted away. Yun Chujo curled her lips. Although this method could only be used for a while, it could be used for a while. The crux of the problem now was, why did that damn huge sword buzz the moment she took out the relic? Yun Chujo and Di Baiming discussed for a while, but they did not come to any useful conclusion. Yun Chujo simply sat cross-legged and meditated, wanting to take advantage of this time to comprehend the sword intent. At this moment, the the sky gradually darkened. Yun Chujio meditated for a while, but she did not gain anything. Instead, more and more drifters gathered. During the day, these drifters might have been afraid, so only a few dared to show off. Now, under the cover of the night, they all floated over. Although Yun Chujio was afraid of the humming of the giant sword again, she was not stupid enough to let the murderous aura enter between her brows. Therefore, she gritted her teeth and took out the relic, but she was surprised to find that the giant sword did not make a humming sound. Yun Chujio's heart moved.
Damn.
She understood. The humming of the giant sword during the day was the trick of these drifters. No wonder they were so cooperative with her. Now that she was so far away from the giant sword and these drifters had all run here, they naturally could not make any more humming sounds. Although the drifters were afraid that Yun Chujio was holding the relic and retreated a distance, they did not give up and still looked eager to give it a try. Yun Chujio was so angry that she gritted her teeth. She held the relic in her left hand and pointed at the drifters with her right hand and scolded, "Don't pester me anymore, or I will make you regret it for the rest of your lives." No, for 8 lifetimes. When the drifters heard Yun Chujio's words, they let out sizzling sounds. It was obvious that they were mocking her. Yun Chujio was so angry. These drifters were even more detestable than the drifters in her courtyard. Moreover, they were even more daring. If she were to be pestered by them all the time, not to mention comprehending the sword intent, she would definitely go crazy. What should she do? Was there really nothing she could do about these drifters? Yun Chujio thought about it and stomped her feet. She could only fight fire with fire. Yun Chujio immediately took out 3 puppet discs.
She had already thought about it.
If things were to develop in a good direction, it would be a battle between 2 groups of murderous auras. She could then sit back and reap the benefits. Of course, if the drifters of the sword pool won, that would be the best. Even if the worst outcome was that 2 groups of drifters worked together to take care of her, it was not a big deal since she had the Sarairo in her hands. As soon as Yun Chujio took out the puppet plate, the drifters in it flew out impatiently. They were dumbfounded when they saw the indigenous drifters not far away. The indigenous drifters were not any better. Some of them even collapsed on the ground in shock. Hei Shinjo blinked her eyes and said to the drifters in the sword pool, "Haven't you always said that you are the strongest killing intent in the world? But just now, these drifters said that they are 10,000 times stronger than you." The shameless provocation immediately had an effect. The 2 drifters immediately struggled and rolled in the air. Chapter 4055. You can still be useful sometimes. Hei Shinjo squinted her eyes and looked at the scene in front of her. She was so happy. She lowered her voice and said to the small silver snake in her sleeve pocket, "My Prince Charming, did you see that? No matter if it's a person or a thing, they have to grow a brain. I just need to move my mouth and let them bite each other." Although Di Baiming also praised Yun Chujio's intelligence, he knew that she was a person who liked to be bullied. Therefore, he said indifferently, "The matter hasn't been settled yet. Let's wait and see." Yun Chujio curled her lips. "Do you still need to wait and see? These 2 groups of drifters are obviously incompatible with each other. They must be beaten until their heads bleed. I'll just wait and see if I can reap the benefits." However, Hei Shinjo was soon dumbfounded. That was because she realized that although the 2 groups of drifters were entangled, they did not look like they were fighting with their lives on the line. Instead, they looked like they were playing and they were having a great time. This fellow's head immediately buzzed. It was over. He had shot himself in the foot. Just as this fellow was feeling miserable, he saw the sword pool drifter and the native drifter throwing the 3 puppet plates in the air as if they were balls. It was simply wonderful. This fellow consoled himself. If he was willing to play, he could play. As long as he didn't attack her, he could just treat these 3 puppet discs as food for the dogs. However, while the idea was beautiful, reality was cruel. The 2 groups of floating sword pool were most likely tired of playing with the puppet discs and decided to play with a certain Jiao. They surrounded her with ill intentions. Yun Chujio waved the Saraira in her hand. She shouted in exasperation, You bunch of white-eyed floating sword pool. If it weren't for me, would you have waited 1,000 years? If it weren't for me, would you have met each other all the way from the mountains and rivers? How dare you attack me instead of being grateful to me? Have you lost your conscience to dogs? No. These idiots obviously didn't know what conscience was. Although they were intimidated by the relic in Yun Chujio's hand, they still approached Yun Chujio. Yun Chujio regretted it. She was so smart that she was fooled. What should she do now? Even if she used her heel to think, if these idiots entered her forehead, nothing good would happen. Maybe she would turn into a monster who killed people like a horse. Just as Yun Chujio was sweating profusely, the small silver snake in her sleeve suddenly said, "Do you still have the Buddha lotus from the fallen god abyss in your storage ring? Take it out." Buddha lotus? Yun Chujio didn't react at first, but she soon came to her senses. Back then, the old monk planted a lot of lotus flowers in the lake of the fallen god abyss. She thought it was a 1,000-leaf golden-grade lotus, but the old monk kept saying that it was a Buddha lotus. Later, because she ate the disguise pill made from the Buddha lotus and turned into a little girl, she still had a lot of Buddha lotuses in her storage ring. However, would that thing be useful? However, she could only try her best now. Therefore, Hei Shinjo took out a few Buddha lotuses from her storage ring and waved them at the drifters.
See?
These are Buddha lotuses. There will be golden old monks coming out from them. You'll be scared to death. Yun Chujio said this to scare the drifters, but the effect was surprisingly good. The native drifters instantly drifted away, and the drifters from the sword pool entered the puppet plate. It was as if nothing had happened before. Yun Chujio was stunned for a moment, and then she said faintly, "My Prince Charming, I have to say that you are useful sometimes. A certain one." Chapter 4056, Prince Charming. You really know a lot. After Hei Shinjo finished her sentence, she realized that there was an 80% chance that she was going to suffer. However, to her surprise, a certain someone only responded with a faint HMM. She didn't know what he meant. "Prince Charming, what I wanted to say just now is that you are always very useful." "Did you hear wrong?" Hei Shinjo said with a little guilt. "You are also right. I am indeed useless most of the time. When you are in danger, I cannot be by your side," a certain someone said lightly. When Yun Chujio heard this, she knew that although the certain someone was not angry, he was a little annoyed. Otherwise, he would not have said my. It had to be said that every man did not care about his face. Was this hurting his self-esteem? This guy quickly changed the topic and started to smooth out his hair without batting an eyelid. "Prince Charming, I have already forgotten about the Buddha lotus. Fortunately, you reminded me in time. Otherwise, I really would not have been able to do anything to those drifters. Prince Charming, you are very knowledgeable. Tell me, how did you know that the Buddha lotus was useful to those drifters?" "I am only guessing. Since those drifters are even afraid of the Buddhist scriptures, and the Buddha lotus was specially planted by Master Wang Su to purify the murderous aura, I guess it is also useful to the murderous aura," Di Baiming said slowly. Naturally, he was not really angry because of one sentence. When he heard Yun Chujio's cautious and slightly flattering question, the slight awkwardness in his heart disappeared. Yun Chujio nodded repeatedly when she heard it. In order to make up for the wrong words he said just now, this guy started to flatter her. "Idol, you know too much. I really admire you too much. I have to say, one of the best things I've done since I was young was to fall in love with you. You are simply the best husband in the world." Although a certain being knew that Hei Shinjo was trying to curry favor with him, it did not stop the entire snake from feeling extremely comfortable. It wished that Yun Chujio could continue to speak. When Hei Shinjo saw that a certain being had finally calmed down, only then did she change the topic. "Male god, although this Buddha lotus is useful to those drifters, these damn things are getting bolder and bolder. In the beginning, they were very afraid of the relic. After a while, I think they are not too afraid anymore." Di Baiming was also uncertain. The killing aura was different from humans or demonic beasts. Not only were they mischievous, but they also seemed to be indestructible. There was really nothing anyone could do about it. He thought for a while and said, "You don't have to worry too much. Since those murderous auras saved you last time, it means that they don't want your life, so they won't force you too much. You just have to be careful. Also, when you were in the sect, these murderous auras weren't so arrogant. I'm afraid it has something to do with the environment here. When you leave, they will naturally stop." Yun Chujio heard Di Biming's analysis and felt that it made sense. When she went to the Blood Sand Island previously, the drifters could only hide in the puppet disc and did not dare to come out. Now they were dealing with her together with the indigenous drifters. It was obvious that they had gained the courage of a dog for some reason. In the future, when she left the nameless sword sect, these drifters would not pose any threat to her. Thinking of this, Hei Shinjio immediately felt much more relaxed. She also had the intention to tease a certain honored master. However, a single sentence from a certain honored master dispelled her thoughts. "Little Jio, since the killing intent has already left, you should properly comprehend the sword intent." Chapter 4057. Quickly play with the drifter. Hei Shinjio thought about it and agreed. She was here to comprehend sword intent, not to tease the gigolo. The gigolo had always had the opportunity to tease her. It was not easy to obtain the eye of sword intent, so she could not let it go to waste. Therefore, the guy sat cross-legged and began to comprehend sword intent. Perhaps it was because he was too far away from the giant sword, but he did not gain anything until dawn. Later, he simply let Buttface out to be on guard, and she fell asleep. Dog 2 glanced at the giant sword in the distance, and doubt flashed in its eyes, but it didn't say anything. It just lay down beside Yun Chujio and looked around vigilantly with its dog eyes. It was unknown if the drifters were very afraid of Buddha Lotus, but they didn't appear until dawn. While Yun Chujio was sleeping soundly, Dog 2 woke her up. "Little fairy, someone is coming." Yun Chujio frowned. This fellow hated people disturbing her sleep the most, but she had no choice but to put Buttface into the spirit beast pouch and look up. As expected, 2 figures appeared in the distance. When they walked in, they were Zhao Hui and Li Zhuangji. "Junior Sister Yun, Elder Duanmu helped you plead for mercy this morning and asked us to bring you back. Junior Sister Yun, are you alright?" Zhao Hui felt a little guilty, however. He was just an ordinary inner sect disciple. He really couldn't be of much help with the situation yesterday. When Yun Chujio heard that she was to go back, her anger dissipated a little after she woke up. Whether it was comprehending the sword intent or finding a way to obtain the bone, she had to be closer to the giant sword. This fellow thought to herself that it wasn't in vain for her to curry favor with old man Duanmu recently. At the critical moment, she was still reliable. However, those damn drifters wouldn't play any more tricks, right? If she waited until she returned and the huge sword hummed again, those people would definitely expel her again. Perhaps they would expel her even further. Therefore, Yun Chujio followed Zhao Hui and Li Zhuangji back to their original positions with some uneasiness in her heart. Elder Duanmu gave her a warning glance. His meaning was self-evident. He wanted her to be more obedient and not cause any more trouble. Hei Shinjio felt bitter in her heart. It wasn't that she wasn't being honest, it was just that those drifters were too hateful. Just as she was thinking about it, she saw a few strands of drifters stealthily drifting over from the giant sword. Yun Chujio felt her head ache. What should she do? She couldn't just watch those drifters get their way, right? However, no matter what she did, the giant sword would probably buzz. It was really going to kill her. It was not that Yun Chujio did not think of shouting to attract everyone's attention. However, the killing aura was too bizarre. Who would believe it? Moreover, the killing aura was very faint. It would dissipate at any moment. When that time came, she would have to bear the blame again. This was also not possible. That was also not possible. It was really worrying. At this time, the killing aura had already floated in front of Yun Chujio. It was trying to get close to her eyebrows with ill intentions. Yun Chujio stood up in a hurry and took out a tree branch from her storage ring. She jumped into the empty space and began to gesture. Others might think that this fellow was waving around randomly, but in reality, this fellow was attacking the few drifters. After all, when she was in the Nameless Sword sect, she would use the drifters to practice her swordsmanship whenever she was free. She had some experience dealing with these drifters. Moreover, she vaguely realized that the drifters in the sword pool liked to practice their sword skills with her. Perhaps these native drifters also liked it. Needless to say, Hei Shinjo was right. When the few strands of drifters saw Yun Chujio waving the tree branches to play with them, they immediately jumped up and down happily. Chapter 4058. Let nature take its course. Yun Chujio's actions naturally attracted the attention of others. However, this situation was not unusual. After all, some people would practice their sword to verify their insights. However, the crux of the problem was that even in the eye of sword intent, the person with the best comprehension would need at least 3 days to reach this stage. Could it be that Yun Chujio already had insights? Wasn't she expelled previously? She already had some insights just after returning. How is this possible? Wan Pengcheng snorted coldly and said sarcastically, "She is used to being in the limelight. Perhaps she is just blindly sparring." It had to be said that Wan Pengcheng's words spoke the hearts of everyone. They also thought so. This Yun Chujio must be deliberately mystifying things. It was impossible for her to have any insights. Moreover, she was just randomly gesturing. She didn't have any rules at all. If she did this when facing enemies, she would have died long ago. Hence, everyone no longer paid attention to Yun Chujio. They continued to comprehend the sword intent. A certain Jiao, who was miserable, played with the few wisps of drifters for 2 hours. She was so tired that her forehead was covered in sweat. Her heart was like a bleeding dog. Yun Chujio was not very powerful, but even the gigolo who hated the heavens and the earth had to be obedient. However, the people who were tortured by these drifters were neither human nor ghost. It was so frustrating. This guy gritted his teeth. Sooner or later, she would find a way to deal with these drifters. When that time came, she would make them suffer a fate worse than death. However, the Eye of Sword Intent only opened once every 100 years. It was best for her to abduct all the drifters here so that she could deal with them slowly in the future. As for the method to abduct them, she had to figure it out. Those native drifters would never have thought that Yun Chujio already had the idea to abduct them at this time. These silly and sweet-natured people were still playing with Hei Shinjo happily. After a while, Yun Chujio could not take it anymore. She decided to break the rules and took out the relic from her storage ring. As expected, the few strands of drifters drifted away unwillingly. However, to Yun Chujio's surprise, the huge sword did not make any humming sound. Yun Chujio could not help but feel puzzled. Did those drifters discover their conscience? This fellow sat on the ground and rested for a while before returning to the team to continue comprehending the sword intent. Wan Pengcheng, who was sitting in front of her, lowered his voice and mocked, "You can't pretend anymore, right? A trash like you still wants to comprehend the sword intent? Dream on." The sword intent you comprehended previously was like a blind cat meeting a dead mouse. You should guard that sword intent for the rest of your life. Yun Chujio treated him as if he was barking like a dog and ignored him. However, his words reminded Yun Chujio of the process of comprehending the chaotic sword intent back then. Back then, she had randomly demonstrated the chicken slaughtering sword technique a few times. Suddenly, she had a thought of winning amidst chaos. Then, her entire body entered a mysterious state. When she woke up, she had grasped the chaotic sword intent in a daze. It seemed that one could not force one to comprehend the sword intent. Who knows, she might trigger something and suddenly have an epiphany. It was better to let nature take its course. Let nature take its course? A sentence suddenly appeared in Yun Chujio's mind. Human law earth, earth law heaven, heaven law Tao, Tao law nature. Yun Chujio thought about it and could not help but mutter, Tao law nature? Tao law nature. Wan Pengcheng was the closest to her. He turned around with a gloomy face. Yun Chujio, can you be a little more civic-minded? Can you not disturb others' comprehension? Wan Pengcheng stopped abruptly because he saw Yun Chujio suddenly take out a large kitchen knife from her storage ring. Was she going to kill him in front of everyone? How dare she? Chapter 4059. The Devil. The moment Yun Chujio took out her large kitchen knife, not only Wan Pengcheng, even the surrounding disciples were shocked and hurriedly dodged. Was this Yun Chujio crazy? Unexpectedly, Yun Chujio did not attack Wan Pengcheng. Instead, she held the large kitchen knife and directly retreated to the back of the crowd. Then, she placed the large kitchen knife in front of her and continued to mumble, human law, earth law, heaven law, Tian Dao, Dao law, and nature? Since everything in the world has its own laws, then what is Tian Dao? Those who were close to Yun Chujio immediately felt that Yun Chujio was really crazy when they heard her words. What was Tian Dao? Tian Dao was the ruler of all things in this world. No one, no matter what, could violate Tian Dao. If they were responsible, they would definitely be punished by the heavens. Yun Chujio actually asked what the Tian Dao was. Wasn't she crazy? Wan Pengcheng gritted his teeth. He originally wanted to report this to Elder Wan, but in order to avoid suspicion, he directly said to Elder Duanmu, Elder Duanmu, Yun Chujio is either crazy or pretending to be crazy. She is deliberately trying to affect our comprehension of sword intent. Please help us make a decision. Elder Duanmu looked at Wan Pengcheng coldly and said, Shut up. She is having an epiphany. Epiphany? Everyone was stunned when Elder Duanmu said that. It was not rare to comprehend sword intent in the eye of sword intent. No one had heard of anyone who could have an epiphany here. If this epiphany was successful, Yun Chujio would really be lucky. However, this epiphany was not so easy to succeed. In the end, there might not be a reason for it. It was more important to continue comprehending sword intent. Thus, everyone no longer paid attention to Yun Chujio and continued comprehending the sword intent. As for Yun Chujio's mumbling from time to time, it did not affect the crowd at all. It was just Wan Pengcheng using the topic as an excuse. Cultivators were all determined people. Not to mention mumbling to themselves. Even if they spoke loudly, there was actually no interference. A few strands of the drifters sneakily approached Yun Chujio. This little girl seemed to have been possessed. This was a good time for them to take advantage of the situation. However, a red light flashed on the large kitchen knife, and the drifters immediately disappeared in fright. Unfortunately, Yun Chujio was in a state of self-absorption and did not see what was happening. The small silver snake in her sleeve pocket could not see what was happening outside, so no one saw what was happening. Until night fell, Yun Chujio was still in a state of self-absorption. She did not mumble to herself anymore, but sat on the spot, meditating and cultivating. Everyone was certain that she didn't have an epiphany. They thought to themselves, I knew it. How could she be so lucky to have an epiphany in the eye of sword intent? It turned out that she was happy for nothing. Just as everyone was thinking about this, Yun Chujio's body flashed with light. Everyone stood up in surprise. This was a breakthrough? Everyone thought to themselves with jealousy. She really had an epiphany? It was really like a blind cat meeting a dead rat. However, her spiritual power was so low. Even if she broke through one level, she would only be at the 4th level of spiritual connection. However, almost in an instant, Yun Chujio's body shone brightly again. She actually broke through again? She broke through 2 levels in one go? It's normal for her to break through 2 levels. After all, it was an epiphany. A moment later, the night sky was once again lit up by the brilliance that erupted from Yun Chujio's body. 3 levels? After the epiphany, there was actually a 3-level rise. It was really nothing. After another moment, Yun Chujio's body once again shone with brilliance. Everyone, this is normal my ass. 1 epiphany and she broke through 4 levels? This is simply a freaking monster. Chapter 4060 had reached the 9th level of spiritual connection. Although everyone was dumbfounded, they felt that the 4th level should be enough. However, Yun Chujia's body shone again. Everyone was numb. They only had one thought to comfort themselves. Fortunately, Yun Chujio was only at the 3rd level of spiritual connection. Even if she tried her best to break through, she would not be able to break through to the next level. She was far from them. Therefore, when Yun Chujio shone for the 6th time, they were not surprised at all. They were really not surprised at all. Didn't she just gain an epiphany and advance to level 6? Didn't she just advance from level 3 of psychic power to level 9 of psychic power? What was so great about it? They were not jealous at all. It was as if they had drunk a jar of vinegar and felt a little sour. Finally, Yun Chujio's body no longer shone. In fact, Yun Chujio was not as exaggerated as upgrading to level 6. She was originally at level 5 of psychic power, but she had been hiding it with the hidden spirit ring. This time, she took advantage of the epiphany to adjust to her normal level in one go. Even so, Hei Shinjo was very happy. If it were not for the fact that there was a big gap between psychic power and non-psychic power, she might have continued to break through. This epiphany was much more efficient than lightning strikes. In the future, it would be beneficial to think about it when she had nothing to do. Yun Chujio felt that it was almost time, so she opened her eyes. Then, she felt everyone's envious and jealous gazes. This fellow was extremely happy in his heart, but he pretended to be calm on the surface. However, his eyes were filled with a smile that made people gnash their teeth. Elder Duanmu was the first to speak. Yun Chujio, did you have an epiphany just now? What did you have an epiphany about? Elder Duanmu's words could be said to have expressed everyone's thoughts. All of them stretched their necks and looked eagerly at Yun Chujio. Yun Chujio said with a smile, "It's nothing much. I just thought of a saying in the secular world. Man is like the earth is like the heaven is like the law of heaven is like the law of heaven, and heaven is like the law of nature. I just felt that this person should be unrestrained and let nature take its course." Then he had an epiphany. "Actually, I was just thinking about it casually. Who would have thought that I would have an epiphany? I broke through so many levels all of a sudden. It's very easy for my foundation to be unstable. I'm quite helpless about it." Everyone was so angry that they were twitching. What did she mean by taking advantage and pretending to be good? This fellow was indeed. It was really too infuriating. She was still worried about her foundation being unstable. They also really wanted to worry about her foundation being unstable, okay? But they didn't have the opportunity to do so. Elder Duanmu's expression froze, but he didn't say anything. Enlightenment was a personal opportunity, and one couldn't force it. One could only say that this little girl was very fortunate. He nodded slightly and said to the other disciples, "All right, everyone, continue to comprehend sword intent." Everyone was already in no mood to comprehend sword intent, so what was there to comprehend? Just a casual thought, and he had already broken through to the 6th level. Since that was the case, they could just think about it. Furthermore, they had already cultivated for 2 days and 1 night, so they were indeed a little tired. Thus, many of them retreated to the back of the group. Some ate while others slept. Wasn't that Yun Chujio already? Did she want to be unrestrained and let nature take its course? Then they would just eat when they were hungry and sleep when they were sleepy. Elder Duanmu shook his head and did not stop everyone. No matter if it was an epiphany or comprehension of sword intent, they could not force it. Such a huge commotion on the nameless sword sect side naturally attracted the attention of the other sections. After hearing what had happened, they naturally sighed at Yun Chujio's good luck. Xiaoyu's expression was very ugly. That trash actually had an epiphany? No, she had to comprehend sword intent, and she had to comprehend 2 types of sword intent. When the time came, she would definitely teach that trash a lesson. Chapter 4061. Did you see the fog? Many people retreated to the back to eat, drink, and sleep. As a result, there were many empty seats in front. Everyone followed the rules and no one had any intention of taking those empty seats. However, Yun Chujio had never been a person who followed the rules. On one hand, she was thinking about the bones that Di Baiming was looking for. On the other hand, she wanted to see where the drifters were hiding. Therefore, she eagerly walked to one of the empty seats for the core disciples in the front row. Although the disciples on the left and right were a little surprised to see her, no one said anything. Yun Chujio stretched her neck and looked forward. Although it was nighttime, she could still see vaguely under the moonlight. The giant sword was completely black. She didn't know what material it was made of, but there were some simple patterns on it. It looked very high-end and high-class. However, Yun Chujio was not very interested in the giant sword. Her eyes darted around as she looked at the ground below the giant sword. That place did not look any different from other places. As the giant sword was very big, the area below was not small either. If she were to flip it bit by bit, she did not know how long it would take to find the bones. Moreover, she did not have the chance to flip it. Yun Chujio began to search for the drifters again. Although the drifters were carefully hiding their tracks, Yun Chujio still saw a few strands of drifters floating out from the ground. Yun Chujio could not help but feel puzzled. Although these drifters were very faint, it was unreasonable that no one had discovered them. Could it be that they were all blind? In order to verify her guess, Yun Chujio whispered to a successive disciple beside her, "Senior brother, do you see the fog that is floating under the giant sword?" That disciple stared at it carefully for a while, then nodded. There are indeed a few wisps of faint mist, but it's normal for there to be mist here. Senior brother, don't you feel that it doesn't look like ordinary mist? Could it be something else? Yun Chujio probed. That disciple was stunned at first, then looked at Yun Chujio with a sympathetic gaze. Junior sister Yun, could it be that you're not feeling well, because you've just had an epiphany? The disciple was too embarrassed to say that Yun Chujio was mentally ill. Fog was fog. What else could it be? No wonder this Yun Chujio had an epiphany. It turned out that her brain was different from the average person's. Yun Chujio's face stiffened. She laughed and said a few words before continuing to pretend to comprehend Soar intent. She had said it before. No one would believe her even if she told them about the drifters. No wonder they were so arrogant. Yun Chujio looked at the fog and the giant swords with a sad face. It was too difficult to abduct the drifters or dig out their bones. She wanted to let Xiao He dig underground, but under the watchful eyes of everyone, it was almost like suicide. While Yun Chujio was pondering, a mocking voice came from her side. Yun Chujio, you should know your place. Why did an inner disciple like you run to the territory of a successor disciple? Go back to your own place. Yun Chujio raised her head and looked. The one who spoke was the disciple of Master Ouyang, Zhuang Hong, and Zhang Li's ungrateful junior brother. Martial Uncle Zhuang, I didn't take your position in the first place. Aren't you being a little nosy? The second elders haven't spoken yet. Who do you think you are? Third, it's shameful to waste. I'm using resources efficiently. Finally, I've always walked, so I don't know how to scram. Why don't you scram a few times and let me see? Chapter 4062. Let the dog be the sect leader. Zhuang Hong's expression immediately turned ugly. He was seated at the front of the core disciples and only realized that Yun Chujio had run to the front when he heard Yun Chujio talking to the disciple from before. Previously, Yun Chujio had gained 6 levels of enlightenment and he was already unhappy, so he came over to make use of the topic. However, he did not expect to be scolded by Yun Chujio until he almost vomited blood. The successor disciple who was talking to Yun Chujio just now secretly tugged at Yun Chujio's clothes and gave her a look. That meant that he did not want to go against Zhuang Hong. Zhuang Hong was the disciple of the sect master, and he might be the next sect master in the future. Going against him, wouldn't he be making things difficult for himself? Yun Chujio did not expect this disciple to be kind to her. However, she had never been afraid of anyone. She was not even afraid of Elder Wan, let alone Zhuang Hong. The next sect master? In her dreams. Even if this sect master let dog be the sect master, He would not let Zhuang Hong be the sect master. Buttface, who was in the spirit beast bag, immediately asked eagerly, "Little fairy, do you mean that you want me to be the next sect master of the nameless sword sect?" Scram. Buttface curled his lips. She was the one who said that dog would be the sect master, and now her expression had changed. Women were indeed fickle. Zhuang Hong said with a livid expression, "Yun Chujio, I don't have time to argue with you. Quickly return to your seat." Yun Chujio rolled her eyes and ignored him. She continued to stare at the huge sword in front of her in a daze. Zhuang Hong was about to flare up when Elder Duanmu said indifferently, "Zhuang Hong, the seat is empty too. Let her go." Although Zhuang Hong thought highly of himself, he did not dare to go against Elder Duanmu. He could only agree and return to his seat. Elder Wan's hands tightened in his sleeves. That old thing Duanmu Mao was originally very displeased with Yun Chujio, but now he actually took such good care of her. Yun Chujio, on the other hand, felt that Elder Duanmu was great. Indeed, it was good to have a big tree as a shade. After this small episode, Yun Chujio continued to stare at the huge sword and the floating drifter below her, worrying. Either she had a way to silently take away the bones, or she had a way to lure everyone away so that Xiao He could dig out the bones. However, either method was too difficult, and there was almost no chance of success. Just as He Xinjiu was thinking about it, the small silver snake in her sleeve pocket began to wriggle uneasily. Yun Chujio was stunned at first, then she stood up and went to the back of the crowd. Zhuang Hong saw this scene and sneered. This stupid girl was just being stubborn. She would just leave obediently. Yun Chujio walked to the back of the crowd, lowered her head and leaned closer to the sleeve pocket, saying in a low voice, "What's wrong? I'm most likely going to transform. Quick, leave this place." A certain figure squeezed out a sentence from between his teeth. Yun Chujio, she didn't provoke him, did she? Why was he going to transform? The pretty boy must have imagined something inappropriate for children. This pervert. However, even though he was complaining, he couldn't really let a certain someone run around in public. Not only was it embarrassing, but it was also hard to explain. Therefore, this guy held his stomach and said to Zhao Hui, who was not far away, "Senior brother Zhao, my stomach is bad again. I have to go and take care of it." Zhao Hui, "Junior sister Yun, you are sick. You have to be treated." What else could he say? He could only watch Yun Chujio run into the night, and from the looks of it, she seemed to be planning to run far away. However, it made sense. A girl would naturally run far away to hide her shame. Chapter 4063 was broken into pieces. Some of the disciples also heard the conversation between Yun Chujio and Zhao Hui, but they did not take it to heart. Yun Chujio ran all the way until she was sure that no one would see her. Then, she released the small silver snake. Then, she pointed at him and said, "Prince Charming, tell me, are you not pure again? I didn't expect you to be such a Prince Charming." The silver snake's body had already swelled up. Hearing Yun Chujio's words, it swelled up even more. Yun Chujio was even worried that it would explode. Nonsense. On one hand, it's because when you had an epiphany, it caused the surrounding spiritual energy to change. On the other hand, because the distance between you and the bone was shortened, that's why I'm like this, a certain venerable said dryly. His head was buzzing right now. When he thought about running for his life later, he felt that the entire snake was in trouble. However, a certain someone obviously had experience. He took out a large piece of black cloth and crawled inside. This way, even if he transformed, he would not run for his life. Beside him, 9 Pervert blinked his eyes. He actually thought that he could use a piece of black cloth to deprive her of the right to admire a handsome man?
Tui, dream on.
This guy said in shock, "Prince Charming, you'll ruin it if you hold on like this. Come, I'll help you hold on." Yun Chujio said as she shamelessly crawled into the black cloth. Then, she met the silver snake's angry vertical pupils. This guy couldn't help but be a little cowardly. He smiled embarrassedly and said, "Since you don't feel bored, then you can stay inside by yourself." After this guy finished speaking, He quickly retreated from the cloth and scolded himself. Yunchujio. Oh, Yunchujio, why are you so cowardly? This guy kicked the pebble under his feet in annoyance. If he had evil intentions but no guts, he was most likely talking about people like her.
Sigh, it was all because of that damn Goeba.
Otherwise, the pretty boy would have been her long ago, not to mention looking at him. Therefore, with the familiar formula and the familiar smell, Goeba was scolded again. This fellow scolded Goeba for a long time, but he did not see any movement in the cloth, so he asked, Prince Charming, are you changing or not? I'm waiting. After a long while, a certain someone said, maybe it's because I'm too far away from the bone, so a certain someone did not continue. He felt that the face that he had painstakingly picked up before was now broken into pieces. Yunchujio lifted the black cloth and squatted on the ground, glaring at the small silver snake. Prince Charming, are you joking with me? I'm a girl, and my stomach gets upset whenever I'm free. Do you think that's a good idea? What could a certain being say? He could only remain silent. He did not know whether he should be glad or annoyed that he did not run away. Shinjio naturally knew that a certain being did not do it on purpose. After all, he had no choice when it came to transforming. Wait, something was not right. She narrowed her eyes, poked the silver snake's head with her hand, and said fiercely, Prince Charming, good. So you were lying to me. You said that you could recover your human body at any time, so you naturally could control the time of transformation. So how could you talk about the failure of transformation? Tell me, what exactly happened? You know my methods. If you don't tell me, I can only verify the description in the storybook. A certain man was so frustrated that he wanted to bang his head against the wall. In the end, he was discovered by this little scoundrel. He could even imagine that in the next period of time, he would have to live a life worse than death. Beiming sighed. At first, I thought that the last transformation was because of the excessive sealing of the 7 emotions and 6 desires. But later I realized that it was not because of this reason. Yunchujio frowned. Then what is the reason? Chapter 4060. For you used to be a snake, right? It was caused by using a secret technique, Beiming said in a low voice. A secret technique? The one where you absorbed 2 bones when you were chased by that bastard Lon Luochen at Chaotian sect? Yunchujio asked in surprise. Beiming was about to nod, but he realized that he was a snake and was being held by the little rascal. He had no choice but to say, that's right. Initially, I thought that after using the secret technique, my body would only be weak. I didn't expect that there would be such a problem. Yunchujio's expression turned ugly when she recalled the incident where she was chased by Tower Master Luochen. She continued to ask, is there any way to solve it? I'm not sure yet, but one thing is for sure. These bones are extremely important to me. It's better to collect more. Yunchujio nodded. Previously, the pretty boy had become very powerful after absorbing the power of the bones. If she could find more bones, it would definitely be very beneficial for the pretty boy to completely break the seal. However, she blinked her eyes and said, Prince Charming, I actually think that you were most likely a snake in the past. Otherwise, why would you turn into a snake instead of a pig? A certain someone, Beiming took a deep breath and said, Little Gio, this is the last time I will tell you. First, this is not a snake, but a dragon. Second, this is because my spiritual beast is an ice dragon, so this is not a snake. Not a snake. Shinjio pursed her lips and refused to admit it. However, this guy was used to playing by the rules. When he saw that the silver snake was showing signs of turning into a black snake, he quickly changed the topic. Alright, I get it. You're not a snake, you're a human. You're a fair-skinned, beautiful, and long-legged person. Well, if I go back now, you won't transform again, right? The small silver snake's body stiffened. Fair-skinned, beautiful, and long-legged? Although every word was correct when taken apart, why was it so awkward when put together? He paused for a moment before saying, Previously, it was because of the change in the spiritual energy from your epiphany and the superposition of the bones. Now, it should be fine only because of the bones. Hearing that, Yun Chujio immediately put the small silver snake back into her sleeve pocket and shamelessly put the black cloth into her storage ring. This fellow's intentions were clear as day. If she didn't have the black cloth, the next time she transformed, she would be able to openly admire it. Yun Chujio returned to the base and chose an empty seat at the front to sit down. She calmed her breath and focused on comprehending the sword intent. Unfortunately, those drifters came to cause trouble again. Yun Chujio had the intention to take out the lotus, but she was afraid that the drifters would make a buzzing sound again. Secondly, she hadn't seen any records about the lotus in the records of Atlas Continent. If she took it out rashly, she might be in trouble. Therefore, Yun Chujio gritted her teeth and could only go to the back of the team and take out a tree branch to play with the drifters. At first, everyone thought that Yun Chujio was going to have an epiphany or comprehend sword intent again. They all stared at her, but they found that Yun Chujio's sword technique did not have any patterns, and there was no movement for a long time. They all curled their lips, and no one paid any more attention to her. Soon, it was the 8th day of the opening of the Eye of Sword Intent. Many people had already comprehended sword intent. They even heard that Xiaoyu from the Flying Flower Island had already comprehended 2 types of sword intent. Joy filled the entire Eye of Sword Intent. Chapter 4065 The grandson of his grandson, however. Amidst the joy, there was one person who was very miserable, even to the point of having nothing to live for. Hei Xinjiu had been quietly comprehending the sword intent for the past few days. Even when she slept and ate, it had to be the conscience of those damn drifters. Thus, everyone saw Yun Chujio waving the tree branch as if she was having a seizure every day. However, she did not comprehend the slightest bit of the sword intent. As a result, there were more and more jeers. Among them, Wan Pengcheng and Zhuang Hong were the most jeers. Yun Chujio, I advise you not to play around with your broken tree branch. Even if you die of exhaustion, it's impossible for you to comprehend sword intent with your current level of comprehension. Even though you have an epiphany, so what? Didn't your spiritual power not even reach the level of Lingwu? It's really a waste of the qualification to comprehend the Eye of Sword Intent. Wan Pengcheng had successfully comprehended a type of sword intent, and he could be said to be very proud now. Zhuang Hong snorted at the side and said, "People like her are the most selfish. If it wasn't for her little tricks, how could Liao Tao and the others lose the qualification to comprehend the Eye of Sword Intent? Such a person is not worthy of comprehending the sword intent at all." Elder Duanmu watched coldly from the side and did not stop him. He only frowned. Wan Pengcheng was fine, but Zhuang Hong, as the sect leader's disciple, his bearing was too narrow. He was actually competing with a junior like this. Such a person did not have the qualifications to become the successor of the sect leader. However, Yun Chujio, that little girl, would not normally be bullied like this. Why was she so quiet recently? Elder Duanmu did not know that Hei Xinjiu wanted to be restless. However, those drifters had exhausted her. How could she have the strength to argue with Wan Pengcheng and the others? This fellow wished that she could grind the bones of the drifters into ashes. If not for the fact that the bones were still missing, she would have closed the Eye of Sword Intent earlier. It was too fucking torturous. Finally, the drifters gave Hei Xinjiu time to rest. Yun Chujio sat on the ground and panted heavily. Zhao Hui, Li Zhuangji, and the others came over with worried expressions. "Junior sister Yun, are you alright? Anyway, you've already comprehended sword intent in the past, so don't force yourself." They all thought that Yun Chujio was in a hurry to comprehend sword intent, which was why she didn't practice the sword day and night. Hei Xinjia's heart was like a dog that was bickering, but she had no way to say it. She just smiled bitterly and said, "Isn't there a saying that diligence can make up for weakness? If I put in more effort, I'll definitely gain something." Zhao Hui and the others immediately felt ashamed. Looking at junior sister Yun's strong will, they felt ashamed of their inferiority. Thus, they did not try to persuade her anymore. Instead, they began to meditate and comprehend sword intent, learning from junior sister Yun, who had been cultivating diligently. The corner of Yun Chujia's eyes twitched. Looking at the huge sword in front of her, her heart was very anxious. There were only less than 2 days left, and she still could not think of a solution. Could it be that she had given up just like that? The day before, Di Baiming had said to Yun Chujio, "Little Jiu, if there is really no solution, then forget it. I will think of another solution in the future. Do not take any risks." However, the Eye of Sword intent only appeared once every 100 years. If they missed it this time, and the gigolo wanted to collect this bone, then they would have to wait for 100 years. At that time, their grandson's grandson would be able to join them. The strange grass in the dantian shook its leaves. It thought to itself, "You're thinking too much. As long as this Guai Chao was alive, not to mention his grandson's grandson, you wouldn't even have a son." Of course, He Xinjiu did not know what Guai Chao was thinking. Otherwise, she would definitely scold Guai Chao until he was so miserable that the world would fall apart. Chapter 4066. Ninth day. Another day passed amidst Yun Chujia's melancholy. He Xinjiu was so worried that her head was about to explode. The group would be leaving tomorrow morning. She had not comprehended the sword intent, nor had she been able to abduct the killing aura, nor had she found a way to take away the bones. Could it be that she would have to return empty-handed this time? Fortunately, this fellow had never admitted defeat easily. She felt that there was nothing difficult in this world except for those who had a heart. There must be a way. It was just that she had not thought of it yet. Hence, when those drifters came to look for her again, this fellow directly held the relic in his hand and ignored those drifters. Those drifters were already used to playing with Yun Chujio. Now that Yun Chujio was ignoring them, they were naturally somewhat exasperated. Hence, the huge sword emitted a humming sound. Everyone subconsciously turned their heads to look at Yun Chujio, who was at the end of the group. They saw her sitting on the ground without any abnormal movements. However, Wan Pengcheng would not let go of such a good opportunity. He sneered and said, "Yun Chujio, are you here to cause trouble because you haven't comprehended the sword intent? You don't have to pretend anymore. You must have taken out something like Buddhist scriptures just now. You are really immoral." Yun Chujio was already very annoyed. When she heard Wan Pengcheng barking like a dog, her eyes burst with a fierce murderous intent. Wan Pengcheng was so frightened by Yun Chujio's sudden killing intent that he staggered and almost fell to the ground. When he looked again, he saw that Yun Chujio was no different from usual. He cursed in his heart.
He must have seen wrongly just now.
It was impossible for a good-for-nothing to have such a fierce gaze. Yun Chujio stood up and said to the crowd, "Although I didn't do anything, it's obvious that you won't believe me no matter what I say. In that case, I'll take the initiative to leave this place." After Yun Chujio finished speaking, she turned around and left the base. Elder Duanmu gaped and wanted to say something, but after thinking for a while, he didn't say anything. It was the last day anyway, and it seemed like she wouldn't be able to comprehend any sword intent. It was good that she left. At least she would be able to avoid causing trouble. Yun Chujio left the base with her head drooping. She felt that it was good to stay further away. At least she wouldn't have to be afraid of others. She could use the Buddha lotus to make those drifters stay further away, and she could also discuss it with Di Baiming. Hence, this fellow walked for a full 10 miles before he stopped. He then took out the small silver snake from his sleeve pocket. "Little Joe, let's forget about the matter of the bones. It should be, because the opportunity has yet to come. I will come and get it when I have the chance in the future," Di Baiming said. These few days, he could only watch as Yun Chujio was tormented by the drifters. His heart was filled with hatred and heartache. Naturally, he did not want Yun Chujio to be upset over the matter of the bones. Yun Chujio said fiercely, "Prince Charming, Even if we don't take the bones, I have to think of a way to deal with those drifters. They are simply going too far. I must think of a way to bring them back to the sect. When the time comes, I will slowly think of a way to deal with them. I want them to regret it for the rest of their lives. Beiming did not stop her. He could completely understand Yun Chujia's hatred towards those drifters. Other than Guai Chao, the little rascal probably hated these drifters the most. While Yun Chujio was talking to Beiming, the drifters floated over happily. It was obvious that they wanted Yun Chujio to play with them. Chapter 4067. Hold their vital points. Yun Chujio looked at the excited look of the drifters and gritted her teeth. She took out a few lotus flowers and waved them at them. Although the drifters had retreated some distance, they did not leave immediately. It was obvious that they were no longer afraid of the lotus flowers. Yun Chujio cursed in her heart. Damn it, these drifters were simply perverts. Not only could she not shake them off, but they were also becoming more and more daring. Just like those drifters in her courtyard, they initially saw the relics running in all directions, but later on, they did not take it seriously at all. Thinking of those drifters in the courtyard, Yun Chujio's heart suddenly moved. When she went to the Blood Sand Island, those sword pool drifters knew that she was going to leave and did not want to separate from her. They took the initiative to enter the puppet disc. Then, could these native drifters be like the sword pool drifters? Yun Chujio thought of this and sighed faintly. Sigh, little babies, although I have been using Sarairas and Buddhist lotuses to expel you, it is only because I am too tired. From the bottom of my heart, I really enjoy playing with you. Unfortunately, I will leave this place tomorrow. If we want to meet, we will have to wait until 100 years later. Moreover, I may not have the qualifications to come at that time, so we can only meet again in the future. Those drifters were originally floating around happily, but after hearing Yun Chujio's words, they suddenly stopped. Yun Chujio saw that there was a door, so she continued, You guys don't have to be sad. After all, we've only met by chance. You guys will definitely find someone else to play with you guys.
Just forget about me.
When this fellow said this, he even shed a few crocodile tears. The small silver snake coiled around her arm stiffened. It had to be said that the little rascal's ability to lie through his teeth was getting better and better. When the drifters saw this, they began to fly up and down anxiously, looking rather annoyed. Yun Chujio thought to herself, although she did not know why these drifters were pestering her, it was clear that they were reluctant to part with her. As long as she firmly grasped this point, she would definitely be able to control these drifters. Yun Chujio sobbed and said a few more reluctant words. Every time she spoke, a few drops of crocodile tears would fall. It was so sad that it would make anyone who heard it cry. The atmosphere was more or less hyped up. This fellow seemed to have said intentionally or unintentionally, Sigh, the main thing is that you guys are different from the drifters that I brought. They can enter the puppet disc with my spiritual sense. I'm afraid that you guys can't, right? The drifters immediately rushed in front of Yun Chujio anxiously. The meaning was self-evident. They could do that too. They really could do that. A faint light flashed across Yun Chujio's lowered eyes. In her heart, she cursed herself for being so stupid. She was clearly holding on to these drifters' vital points, yet she was foolishly fooled for so many days. Fortunately, it was not too late to wake up now. Not only did she want to abduct these drifters, but she also wanted them to help her retrieve the bones. Yun Chujio had a few thoughts in her mind, and then she said in surprise, You guys can do it too, right? Is it true? When the drifters saw that Yun Chujio finally understood what they meant, they immediately jumped up happily. Yun Chujio also laughed a few times happily, but then she frowned and said, Although you guys can do it too, but I don't have any more puppet discs, right? The drifters immediately became anxious again, just as they were feeling disappointed. They heard Yun Chujio sigh and said, Actually, it's not that there's no other way. It's just that I lack one thing. If you guys can help me get it, I can make a few more puppet discs. Chapter 4068. bones in hand. As soon as Yun Chujio finished her sentence, the drifters anxiously moved closer to Yun Chujio. Did she mean that she wanted something? Yun Chujio sighed. Forget it. That thing is too difficult to obtain. Just pretend that I didn't say anything. Give it up. A certain person said that this little scoundrel was really mean. The more she said that, the more curious the drifters would be. Sure enough, the drifters gathered together and jumped around. They were obviously so anxious that they were about to hit the wall. Until they were so anxious that they didn't want anything else, Yun Chujio then said, "What I want is a small piece of bone buried under the giant sword. However, I don't think this thing is easy to find. Moreover, it's under the giant sword. If you guys are in trouble," before Yun Chujio could finish her words, the drifters could not wait to float away. Yun Chujio confirmed that the drifters had all flown away. Then, she said to Di Baiming, "Prince Charming, how is it? I told you that I would definitely think of a way to deal with those drifters. This is called killing two birds with one stone. Since I kidnapped these drifters and obtained the bones effortlessly, I am really too smart."
Ha ha ha.
Although Di Baiming really wanted to praise Yun Chujio, he felt that it was better to forget about it. He did not need to praise this fellow as he had already praised himself like a flower. If he continued to praise her, she would float to the sky. Yun Chujio bragged for a while. When she saw that Di Baiming did not say anything, she could not help but feel a little disappointed. She poked the head of the little silver snake with her claws. "Little baby, why aren't you saying anything? Do you think you have such good taste? Are you loving me more and more?" Because there was a glimmer of hope in this matter, this fellow had the mood to tease a certain lord. Of course, the most important point was that this fellow knew that Di Baiming wouldn't be able to transform for a while, so he had nothing to fear. Di Baiming had obviously thought of this as well. He was too lazy to resist, because countless blood and tears had taught him that it was useless to resist at this time. He did not continue Yun Chujio's words. Instead, he asked, in a while, "If those drifters really bring the bones over, do you really want to make a puppet disc? There are already 5 puppet discs. Can your divine sense still separate them?" Yun Chujio revealed a sinister smile. "Of course not. Don't worry, I have a good way to kill 2 birds with 1 stone." Di Baiming saw the sinister smile on Yun Chujio's face and could not help but light a candle for those drifters. The outcome of those drifters torturing the little rascals was as miserable as it was. No, it was probably 10,000 times more miserable. However, after waiting for a long time, those drifters did not return. Yun Chujio could not help but feel anxious. Di Baiming comforted her. "Don't worry. It's probably because the sky is still dark. After all, they want to hide from people. It's impossible for them to brazenly take out the bones." Yun Chujio thought about it and agreed, so she temporarily put this matter aside and began to calm down and focus on comprehending the sword intent. In the end, this fellow was still a little unwilling. Others had already comprehended the sword intent, so why couldn't she comprehend it? Seeing this, Di Baiming didn't say anything else, but helped her to be on guard. As night fell, Yun Chujio became anxious again, so she couldn't continue comprehending, so this fellow gave up. She flirted with a certain someone and finally saw the drifters return. The drifters threw Yun Chujio a thumb-sized bone. Yun Chujio took it and looked at it. It was almost the same as the one she had seen in the fallen god abyss. Chapter 4069. The drifters who got played. Yun Chujio asked Di Baiming to confirm it again. Then she asked Di Baiming to put away the bones. Then she looked at the drifters with a smile. "Little babies, you are so capable. I will make the puppet plates now. I will release the sword pool drifters. You guys can play for a while." Yun Chujio took out the 3 puppet plates and released the sword pool drifters as well. When the 2 drifters saw each other, they immediately jumped around happily and did not disturb Yun Chujio from making the puppet discs. 2 hours later, Yun Chujio made a few puppet discs in a decent manner, but she did not inject her spiritual sense into them. She sighed faintly and said, "Little babies, Perhaps I've been too tired playing with you recently. I can't separate my spiritual sense from you.
I'm really sorry.
Those native drifters were instantly enraged.
What?
Wasn't this playing with them? Before the drifters could make a move, Yun Chujio continued, although I'm really sorry to you, this is all for another time. The crux of the problem now is how to bring you to my side. I really can't bear to part with you. Those native drifters were fuming. What was the use of saying such nonsense? Yun Chujio blinked her eyes. Actually, it's not that there's no other way. Aren't there 3 ready-made puppet discs here? Since you're all drifters, then there shouldn't be any distinction between you and me. Just squeeze in. Hearing Yun Chujio's words, the sword pool drifters immediately guarded the 3 puppet discs vigilantly. What a joke. It was fine to play together, but to snatch their toys? No way. There were no windows. Yun Chujio pretended to persuade them. Sword pool drifters, don't be so stingy. As the saying goes, all the drifters in the world are family. You are all drifters, just squeeze together. How could the sword pool drifters listen to her? They immediately guarded the puppet discs even tighter. Yun Chujio spread her hands helplessly. Since you won't give in to each other, let's have a competition. Whoever wins, the puppet discs will belong to them. The sword pool drifter was about to explode in anger. These puppet discs were originally theirs. Why should they give it to these indigenous drifters? Those indigenous drifters were also extremely angry. The little girl had already agreed to let them enter the puppet disc, so why didn't these sword pool drifters agree? Therefore, the 2 groups of drifters pinched each other and kept rolling in the air. Hei Shinju narrowed her eyes as she watched, her heart filled with joy. This was called sowing discord. This was called sowing discord. This was called killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Let's fight, let's fight. If we kill one, we lose one. It would be best if we all die. Unfortunately, these drifters did not disappear so easily. After fighting for 2 hours, there was still no winner between the 2 sides. Yun Chujio felt that it was not a good idea to continue like this. Moreover, if someone came, it would not end well, hence, she said hypocritically, All right. We are originally from the same root. Why are you in such a rush? You are all drifters, so don't kill each other. A certain respected person said, This is all your fault, all right? Now, she was trying to act nice. However, she had to admit that she had used this tactic to sow discord. This way, even if she returned to the nameless sword sect, the little rascal could still let the 2 groups of drifters pin each other down. Those drifters were probably tired from fighting. After hearing Yun Chujio's words, they stopped fighting. Yun Chujio said with a smile, How about this? Harmony is the most important thing in everything. Aren't there 3 puppet discs here? The drifters from the sword pool came first, so they were given 2 puppet discs. You indigenous drifters can squeeze in the other puppet disc first. When I regain my spiritual sense, it'll help you make a few puppet discs. Chapter 4070 Destruction of the Giant Sword. Although the drifter from the sword pool and the native drifter were very unwilling, it was obvious that they had no other choice. They could only follow Yun Chujio's instructions and enter the puppet disc. Actually, even if they were all squeezed into the same puppet disc, it wasn't impossible. However, these drifters liked the trace of Yun Chujio's divine sense in the puppet disc, so they naturally weren't willing to share more with the drifters. When Yun Chujio saw that the drifters had all entered the puppet plate, she quickly put them into her storage ring and laughed. Finally, it has stopped. The world is finally quiet.
Ha ha ha.
This fellow had fully demonstrated what it meant to be arrogant when one was pleased with oneself. He was so cocky that he wished he could vent all the frustrations he had for the past few days. Just as this fellow was being cocky, he felt the ground tremble violently. Then, he heard a faint noise coming from afar. Yun Chujio was stunned. What happened? Because the sky was completely dark and the distance was very far, Yun Chujio couldn't see anything even if she stretched her neck. This fellow felt that it was better to go over and take a look. Hence, He put the small silver snake into his sleeve pocket and went to the encampment. At this moment, not only was the encampment of the Nameless Sword sect in chaos, the encampment of the other 5 great sects was also in chaos. In the middle of it was the terrified cries of the crowd. How did the giant sword suddenly turn into dust? What's going on? Yeah, it turned into dust right in front of our eyes. How did this happen? Did the giant sword just disappear like that? Is there no more Eye of Sword intent in the future? Only then did Yun Chujio realize that the giant sword that was originally standing there had disappeared without a trace. There was only a huge pit left on the ground, and there was a thick layer of dust on the ground. This guy had an inexplicable sense of guilt. This should probably 80% have nothing to do with her keeping the drifters, right? This guy had done his own ideological work for her, so it definitely didn't matter. The drifter was the drifter, and the huge sword was the huge sword. How could they be mixed together? Or maybe it had something to do with the bone that the gigolo wanted. That shouldn't be either. It was just a small piece of bone. How could it be a huge sword? Moreover, the drifter had taken the bone away for some time, and this huge sword had turned into powder after. It must have nothing to do with the bone, right? Although this guy felt a little guilty, his expression was the same as everyone else's. He was shocked and terrified at the same time. His acting skills were simply amazing. At this moment, Wan Pengcheng shouted sharply. This must have something to do with Yun Chujio. If she hadn't taken out the Buddhist scriptures, the giant sword wouldn't have made a buzzing sound. The buzzing sound must have been caused by something unexpected happening to the giant sword, which was why it turned into dust in the end. Wan Pengcheng's words instantly made Yun Chujio become the focus of everyone's attention. Everyone looked at her. If ordinary people were surrounded by such a formation, they might have already been scared silly. However, Yun Chujio laughed coldly. Wan Pengcheng, you've been targeting me repeatedly previously. For the sake of the overall situation, I didn't argue with you. I've even been expelled a few times. I didn't say anything. However, now that you've thrown such a big blame on me, I have no choice but to say a few words. You said that it was because I took out the Buddhist scriptures that the huge sword turned into dust. Then let me ask you, if the huge sword had already experienced some changes, why was everyone able to comprehend the sword intent normally? Moreover, when the huge sword turned into dust, I wasn't here at all. If you want to add to the crime, why don't you say anything? Chapter 4071. Someone would exonerate her. Wan Pengcheng was about to defend himself when Yun Chujio raised her voice and continued. Also, why is the giant sword afraid of the Buddhist scriptures? Everyone knows that the Buddhist scriptures restrain evil things. Could it be that the giant sword is an evil thing? Besides, how could an ordinary Buddhist scripture turn a giant sword into dust? Don't you think what you said is ridiculous? According to what you said, the Buddhist scripture has such great power. In the future, there's no need to fight against the enemy. Just take out the Buddhist scripture and recite it. Even if you and I usually have a feud, you shouldn't mislead people and draw their attention to me. You've drawn things to me again and again. Could it be that you have a guilty conscience? Could it be that the destruction of this huge sword has something to do with you? Wan Pengcheng instantly exploded. You're bullshit. How could I have such a great ability to destroy the huge sword? It was caused by a jinx like you. Ever since you came to our Nameless Sword sect, there have been many changes in the sword pool. You're the nemesis of the sword, so this huge sword was destroyed by you. Yun Chujio's expression was even more mocking. If I really had that ability, I would be the first to kill you. It's all nonsense. I don't want to say any more. I believe that everyone has their own judgment. The Buddhist scriptures destroying the huge sword is simply a joke. Instead of wasting time here, why don't we leave this place quickly? If the huge sword is destroyed and we can't get out, that would be bad. The crowd didn't believe that it was because of the Buddhist scriptures. It was too far-fetched. Besides, the huge sword had existed for an unknown amount of time. Perhaps it was because it had existed for too long that it had turned into dust. The humming sound from before should be the precursor. It was just that Wan Pengcheng had blamed it on Yun Shujiu, so the crowd didn't pay attention to it. Most importantly, everyone felt that Yun Shujiu was right. Now that the huge sword had been destroyed, they did not know if it would affect the opening of the enchantment tomorrow. It was better to hurry to the exit of the enchantment. Anyway, Yun Shujiu could not escape. It was not too late to interrogate her after she got out. Therefore, the 6 sects decided that it was more important to retreat quickly. Everyone began to retreat in a hurry. Their hearts were shrouded in a layer of shadow. It was better not to have any unforeseen circumstances. If they were really trapped here, it would be terrible. However, it was fortunate that the enchantment opened on time the next day. Everyone could not wait to use the Eye of Sword Intent. After everyone came out, they heard a huge explosion. The enchantment began to tremble violently, and the Eye of Sword Intent disappeared in front of everyone. Although everyone did not see it with their own eyes, from the sound, the Eye of Sword Intent must have collapsed. There would be no more so-called Eye of Sword Intent in the future. At this moment, Xiaoyu from the Flying Flower Island sneered and said, "Now that we have come out from the Eye of Sword Intent, shouldn't we deal with Yun Shujiu?" Everyone's attention fell on Yun Shujiu again. Yun Shujiu's expression was very calm because she knew that someone would excuse her. Sure enough, Elder One said with a gloomy expression, "Everyone, Yun Shujiu has already made it very clear. How can a little girl like her destroy a huge sword?" Furthermore, she was banished 10 miles away at that time and did not have the chance to make a move. Therefore, this matter has nothing to do with her. Peng Cheng, this child, framed a disciple of the same sect because of a small personal grudge. This old man will definitely discipline him severely when I return. As for the reason why the huge sword was destroyed, we still have to think long and hard. Most likely, it was because of the passage of time that such a change occurred. Chapter 4072. Elder Wan's help in exonerating her. The other sects were fine, but the nameless sword sect members all looked at Elder Wan in surprise. Who didn't know that Elder Wan hated Yun Shujiu to the core? Why would he speak up for her? Wan Pengcheng was even more dumbfounded. Had his grandfather gone senile? He was about to speak, but he was so frightened by Elder Wan's fierce gaze that he didn't dare to make a sound. Although Elder Duanmu did not understand, he still echoed, "Elder Wan is right. This is just a small grudge between 2 disciples of our sect." Yun Shujiu was a little girl who was at the 9th layer of spiritual perception. Even if she had the intention to do so, she did not have the ability to do so, much less not have the intention to do so. Everyone here is sensible and experienced. Naturally, they can determine whether this matter is true or false. This matter was started by my nameless sword sect, so I apologize to all of you. Elder Duanmu said and was about to bow when an elder from Xuanji sect, who was the closest to him, hurriedly held him up. He smiled and said, "Elder Duanmu, you're being too serious. It's just the noise of a child. We're not 3-year-old children, so how could we really believe such nonsense?" Yun Shujiu felt a little sour when she saw Elder Duanmu's reaction. Although this old man Duanmu did not treat her well at the beginning, he had spoken up for her many times this time. In the future, she would definitely find an opportunity to mend the broken 1,000-cleaver sword. It could be considered as a form of repayment to him. As for why Elder One spoke up for Yun Shujiu, it was because Yun Shujiu found an opportunity on the way out. She said to him alone, "Elder One, it's best that you clean up the aftermath of your grandson's stupid actions. Otherwise, you'll have to bear the consequences." Elder One was furious. Was this Yun Shujiu mentally ill? What right did she have to threaten him? Moreover, what Wan Pengcheng had done was very in line with his intentions. It would be best if he could get rid of Yun Shujiu this time. Yun Shujiu naturally saw through Elder Wan's thoughts. She sneered and said, "Do you think it's great to get rid of me with this matter? Humph, it's really stupid. The crowd might not really convict me. After all, I didn't do this in the first place. A few Buddhist scriptures destroyed the huge sword. It would make people laugh their heads off." When Elder One heard Yun Chujia's words, a cold smile appeared on his face. It was obvious that he did not think much of it. Yun Chujio continued. To take a step back, everyone really believed Wan Pengcheng's words. They felt that the huge sword was destroyed by me. How do you think they will deal with me? Kill me? No, what they will be most interested in is how I destroyed the huge sword and why. When the time comes, I will say that this was the will of the nameless ancestor. I obtained the Buddhist scriptures from the nameless ancestor's cave abode. What do you think will happen when the time comes? When the time comes, the nameless sword sect will become the target of public criticism. And all of this is because of that brainless fool, Wan Pengcheng. Even if I don't have a good ending, you will never be able to sit on the position of the nameless sword sect master. Moreover, even if everyone didn't use their brains to condemn me, I might not necessarily die. After all, I was using the name of the nameless patriarch. If you guys didn't protect my little life, that would be disobeying the nameless patriarch's orders. Do you think that others won't believe my words? TSK, they will believe it. After all, how could a little trash like me destroy the giant sword? Moreover, they will also attribute my previous epiphany to the nameless patriarch. So, you only have one choice now, and that is to clean up the aftermath for that stupid grandson of yours. Elder Wan's originally cold smile became very cold. He had to admit that Yun Chujia's analysis was correct. Everyone might not really convict her. Moreover, if she pushed the blame onto the nameless patriarch, the development of the matter would really be as she had predicted. His situation in the nameless sword sect would become more delicate. Therefore, despite Elder Wan's reluctance, after weighing the pros and cons, he still stepped forward to exonerate Yun Chujio. Chapter 4073. One mountain cannot accommodate two tigers as Elder Wan and Elder Duanmu had attributed the matter to the personal grudges of their disciples, coupled with the fact that the destruction of the huge sword from the Buddhist scriptures was indeed a little far-fetched. Everyone decided to put the matter behind them. Xiao Yu originally thought that Yun Chujio would be in big trouble this time, but she did not expect that nothing would happen in the end. Although she was very unwilling, the elders of the 6 great factions had already expressed their stance. If she still insisted, that would be asking for trouble. However, it was fortunate that she had comprehended 2 sword intents this time, and it was said that although Yun Chujio had an epiphany, she had not even comprehended a single sword intent. Sooner or later, she would be taught a lesson. Everyone sighed with emotion. Looking at it from another angle, they were also lucky. After all, no one would be able to enter the eye of sword intent from now on. Everyone exchanged a few more pleasantries before returning to their respective areas. As soon as they boarded the flying spirit tool, Wan Pengcheng was called away by Elder Wan. When he returned, his expression was very unsightly. He said to Yun Chujio viciously, "Consider yourself lucky this time." "Well, just wait and see." Yun Chujio smiled faintly and said, "We'll be waiting for you, at any time." Wan Pengcheng felt even more stifled when he saw Yun Chujio like this. He wished that he could strangle Yun Chujio to death on the spot. However, when he thought of Elder Wan's words, he could only return to his seat angrily. His scoundrel friends shouted, "Senior Brother Wan, you don't have to lower yourself to her level. This time, Liao Tao and the others have suffered a great loss. The next intersect competition will be held in a few days. When that time comes, there will be a good show to watch." That's right. This time, they won't do any battle team challenge. They will only do one-on-one challenges. When that time comes, Yun Chujio and the others will definitely be beaten up badly. That's right. If I were from Team Sun, I would also try my best to teach them a lesson. Moreover, some people wasted this opportunity for nothing. They actually didn't even comprehend a single sword intent. What a loss. The voices of those few people were very loud. It was obvious that they were intentionally listening to Yun Chujio and the others. Yun Chujio's expression was normal, but the faces of Zhao Hui and the others were a little pale. The 6 of them were not bad. They had all comprehended the sore intent, but even so, they were not a match for Liao Tao and the others. At that time, they might really have to be beaten up. Yun Shuzhou glanced at them and said in a low voice, "What are you afraid of?" When the time comes, you can just admit defeat. The six of them thought for a moment. That's right. Since their goal had been achieved, there was no point in getting a ranking within the top 100. They could just go up on the stage and admit defeat. The six of them suddenly had an epiphany and threw this matter to the back of their minds. On this day, the flying spirit tool arrived at the nameless sword sect. Elder Duanmu and Elder Wan went to report the situation to Master Ouyang, while the others went back to their residences. After Yun Shuzhou returned to her own courtyard, she washed up and then coiled the small silver snake on her arm and went into the courtyard, ready to play with those drifters. Yun Shuzhou took out the puppet disc and released both types of drifters. Then, she looked at them with a smile. The native drifters had never left the eye of sword intent before. When they saw the things in the courtyard, they were very curious. Especially when they saw the two swings, they immediately flew over impatiently. When the sword pool drifters saw this, they were instantly unhappy. It was one thing to snatch their puppet discs, but now they actually wanted to take over their swings? They were courting death. Thus, the two types of drifters started fighting again. Hei Xinjiu, who was watching the show while nibbling on the spirit fruit, was elated. This was exactly what she had expected. As the saying went, there was no room for two tigers on one mountain. These two types of drifters would have to fight in the future. Chapter 4074 You Were a Snake, to begin with the battle between the two types of drifters, was extremely intense. Even after the sun had set, there was still no victor. The drifters from the sword pool had not returned to the sword pool for many days. In the end, they flew away in a huff and forgot to bring the puppet discs with them. Those native drifters did not understand and followed curiously. Yun Shuzhou slowly put the 3 puppet discs into her storage ring. The days ahead would definitely be very interesting. This fellow yawned and said to the little silver snake, "Little baby, it's time for the lullaby." Although a certain pitiful being was extremely unwilling, he could only sing the lullaby to coax the little rascal to sleep. Yun Shuzhou had been very tired these few days, so she fell asleep before the certain being could finish singing the lullaby. The certain being looked at her sweet sleeping face with doting eyes. After looking at it for a while, he finally took out the bone that he had obtained previously. The small silver snake's vertical pupils were slightly confused. He did not know the origin of these bones, but he vaguely knew that these bones were very important to him. Moreover, there was naturally a method to use the secret technique in his mind. He had carefully studied the 3 bones that he had obtained. They were only the size of a thumb. They seemed to be human bones, but they did not seem to be human bones. What kind of bones were these?
Who was he in the past?
As the layers of seals were removed, his original understanding was overturned again and again. He originally thought that he was only the saint of the Dark Continent, but he was not.
Who was he?
The more he thought about it, the more clueless he became. Di Baiming could not help but fall into a state of obsession. The surrounding spiritual energy began to distort, but Di Baiming did not notice it at all. Suddenly, a dazzling light flashed, and Yun Shuzhou opened her eyes in shock. When this guy saw the beautiful scene in front of him, he almost drooled. Di Baiming had also recovered from his obsession at this time. He felt a chill on his body. He looked down, and there was only one thought in his mind. I have run away again. Hei Xinjiu quickly covered her eyes with her claws, but the gap between her fingers was enough for this guy to peek openly. After a moment of blankness, Di Baiming pulled the quilt that was originally covering Yun Shuzhou to cover his body. Hei Xinjiu, who was covering her claws to peek, was annoyed. She hadn't even seen it clearly, but it was covered. What a pity. However, this guy was afraid that Di Baiming would settle the score later, so he said without thinking twice, "Prince Charming, I'm covering my eyes. I didn't see anything." Di Baiming was both embarrassed and angry. He snorted and thought to himself, who the hell would believe you? After he put on his clothes, he threw the quilt on Yunchujio again. For a moment, the atmosphere in the room was very awkward. Of course, only a certain someone was embarrassed. Hei Shinjio was a little nervous.
She was thinking about what to say.
It was best if she could make a certain someone forget her crime. This fellow said dryly, Prince Charming, why did you suddenly become a human? Biming briefly recounted what had happened just now. His heart skipped a beat. It seemed that with this bone by his side, as long as the surrounding spiritual energy changed drastically, he would be able to return to his original form. Yun Chuzhou also thought of this point. While she was happy for Biming, she was also a little disappointed. The days where she could bully the pretty boy as she pleased were gone forever. If she had known earlier, she should have bullied him earlier. In order to change the topic, he said, Prince Charming, you said that you don't know the origin of these bones. I think these bones might be snake bones because you're a snake. Chapter 4075. Hei Shinjio, who was embarrassed and angry Yun Chuzhou, also finished her sentence and realized that her scalp was a little numb. It seemed that the gigolo had warned her that she was not a snake. This guy cursed in his heart. She had already become a snake several times, yet she still refused to admit it. Men were indeed psychopaths who did not mean what they said. As expected, Biming said coldly, Little Joe, I told you that I am not a snake. Have you forgotten? Hei Shinjio laughed dryly. I haven't forgotten. I was just joking. How can a handsome man like you be a snake? Seeing that Biming's expression was still cold, she quickly continued, Prince Charming, don't be angry. If you feel that it's not balanced, then it'll be a snake. It'll be a beautiful snake. It'll be a little snake spirit. Hei Xinjia's words suddenly stopped because this guy was knocked on the bed. Just as the two of them were having an intimate moment, a certain someone's body stiffened. He suddenly raised his head and saw strands of drifters floating in the room, watching them calmly. Biming's body was instantly filled with a biting cold aura, and those drifters walked away eagerly. After being disturbed by the drifters, the romance between the two immediately turned into anger. Hei Shinjio rushed out barefooted with a few lotus flowers in her hands. Damn it, if she didn't deal with these drifters today, her name wouldn't be Yun Chuzhou. Biming sighed silently. He walked out of the house and picked up Hei Shinjio, who was barefooted. Hei Shinjio waved the lotus flowers and said through gritted teeth, Idol, put me down. I must fight to the death with them today. They actually peeked at us making out. They are openly declaring war on me. The reason why Hei Shinjio was so angry was mostly because she was embarrassed. Although she was thick-skinned, it was still embarrassing to be seen as a monkey by those drifters, okay? Biming saw Yun Chuzhou's angry look and laughed lightly. He carried her into the house and gently put her on the bed. Then he patted her little head and said, Why bother with them? It's getting late. Go to sleep. When Yun Chuzhou heard Biming's words, she remembered that she had been kissed until she was dizzy. She immediately hid under the blanket. She was too ashamed to face anyone. It was rare for Biming to see Yun Chuzhou so shy. He did not continue to tease her. Instead, he used his hand to pat her gently. Hei Shinjio fell asleep in a daze. When she fell asleep, Biming's eyes flashed with a cold light. He got off the bed and went into the courtyard. The drifters were jumping around in the courtyard. When they saw Biming coming out, they trembled and moved to the top of the swing. They didn't differentiate between the sword pool drifters and the native drifters. It was more important for them to huddle together to stay warm. They didn't want to be so cowardly. When this man was a small snake, he was just a piece of trash. How did he become human and become so scared? Biming glanced at these drifters and slowly said, No matter what your motive is for getting close to little Gio, if you dare to hurt her, even if you don't die, I will make you wish you were dead. Those drifters gathered into two blurry human figures and kept nodding. They were almost kneeling on the ground to show their submission. Seeing this, Di Biming turned around and returned to the house. He let go of his right hand. There was a thumb-sized bone in his palm. He had borrowed a portion of the bone's power to intimidate the drifters. Chapter 4076 only envied Mandarin ducks and not immortals. While Di Biming was deep in thought, he heard Yun Chuzhou mumble in her sleep, "Little baby, come, give me a kiss." A certain someone. He laughed bitterly and put the bone into his storage ring. Then, he closed his clothes and lay down. Yun Chuzhou consciously leaned over and nestled her little head in his embrace. Di Biming kissed her forehead. Even though the future was dangerous, he believed that the day would come when the clouds would rise and the sun would rise. The next day, He Xinzhou opened her eyes and saw Di Biming lying beside her. He was determined to take advantage of her, and then the bed knocked on him again. The two of them lingered for a while before they got up to wash up. He Xinzhou thought about what happened last night and gritted her teeth in hatred. When she pushed the door open, she found that the two groups of drifters were each occupying a swing. They seemed very obedient? Obedient? Could these things be associated with being obedient? Yun Chuzhou glared at the drifters fiercely before turning around and returning to the house. During breakfast, Yun Chuzhou hesitated for a moment before asking, "Idol, you've recovered your original form. Are you going to leave soon?" Di Biming originally wanted to leave after breakfast, but when he saw Yun Chuzhou's reluctant expression, he said against his will, "I have nothing to do for the time being. I'll accompany you for a few days before leaving." Hearing that, Yun Chuzhou immediately beamed with joy. Then she ate 2 more meat buns. As long as she wasn't in a good mood and didn't have an appetite, it was fine. Because of the handsome man's company, Yun Chuzhou didn't leave the courtyard for a few days in a row. During that time, Zhao Hui and Li Zhuangji sent messages to urge her to go to class, but this guy rejected them on the grounds that he was sick. What bullshit swordsmanship class? Sword formation class? He didn't go to any of them. He could punish them however he wanted. Nothing was more important than having fair skin and beautiful long legs. This guy was in a good mood, and he liked those drifters a lot. Occasionally, he would play with them for a while Di Biming stood at the side and watched with a smile. When Dog 2, who was holding mushrooms in the corner, saw this scene, it felt sour in its heart. So this was the legendary envy of lovers, not immortals. When would it be able to find its little baby? On this day, Di Biming and Yun Chuzhou were playing chess in the courtyard. Of course, He Xinzhou had done many things like stealing chess pieces, so a certain deity pretended not to see it. At this moment, Di Biming's voice transmission talisman started to tremble. Di Biming frowned after he sent his divine sense in. "Prince Charming, what's wrong? Who sent it to you?" He Xinzhou asked while secretly changing the position of a chess piece. Di Biming did not expose her and said indifferently, "It's from Shui Wuji. It's nothing. Let's continue." Seeing this, Yun Chuzhou did not take it seriously. However, after a while, her voice transmission talisman began to vibrate. Shui Wuji's hopeless voice came from it. "Little Sister Jiu, has that facial paralysis recovered? If it has, hurry up and ask him to come back. The little madman and I will be chased until we become homeless dogs." Yun Chuzhou was stunned. She recalled that Di Biming had been absent-minded for the past few days, and her heart was sour and sweet. She suddenly understood that it was not that Di Biming had nothing to do, but he had deliberately stayed behind to accompany her. Shui Wuji and Enfome must have been hunted down until they had no choice. Otherwise, they would not have run back to Towering Sky Continent. When Di Biming saw Yun Chuzhou's expression, he knew that it was Shui Wuji who sent her a voice transmission talisman. He immediately said indifferently, "Shui Wuji, that idiot, always exaggerates. You don't have to pay attention to him." Chapter 4077. However, Yun Chuzhou reached out and grabbed Di Biming's hand. She said word by word, "Idol, what I want is not a day and night of intimacy, but our future. So you go and do your work. I'm fine. Di Baiming held Yun Chujia's hand in his own. He wanted to say something, but he did not know where to start. He owed her too much. Any words would be useless. All he could do was to use all his methods, stand at the peak of this world, and protect her for the rest of her life. The two of them looked at each other for a long time. Yun Chujio took the initiative to pull her hand out of Di Baiming's hand. She bared her little white teeth and said, "Idle, hurry up and leave. Just because I'm with you, I haven't gone out for a few days. It's suffocating me." Di Baiming naturally knew that Yun Chujio said this on purpose, but he did not expose her. He said cooperatively, "Cultivate well, and don't get into trouble. Otherwise, I won't forgive you." In the past, Yun Chujio would snort in disdain when she heard these words. She thought that the gigolo was acting pretentious, but now it sounded full of reluctance and longing. There was also some sadness about parting. She tried her best to hold back the bitterness in her eyes. She squeezed out a smile and said, "I know. I'm such a quiet girl. How can I cause trouble?" Di Baiming did not say anything, but he hugged her tightly in his arms. A watery light flashed in his deep eyes. He finally understood what it meant to be involuntarily. He really wanted to be by her side at all times, but for the sake of their future. For the people they cared about, they could only choose to part. In the end, he still did not say anything and turned around to leave. Yun Chujio looked at the afterimages that disappeared into the distance. She was stunned and did not say anything. For a moment, the courtyard was filled with a sad atmosphere. Even the drifters could feel it. They huddled on the swing and looked at Yun Chujio curiously. Dog 2 in the corner also shed a few tears. It was too touching. No, it was too touching. Was this love? While Yun Chujio was in a daze, the drifters sneaked into the house. Yun Chujio knew that someone was coming. She used her sleeve to wipe her face, because she didn't know when, but her face was already full of tears. Soon, the voices of Zhao Hui and the others came from outside the courtyard. "Junior Sister Yun, we're here to see you." Zhao Hui and the others had been urging Yun Chujio to go to class for the past few days, but she refused on the grounds that she was sick. After some discussion, they decided to come and see her. Yun Chujio opened the courtyard door, and Zhao Hui and the others walked in. Zhao Hui saw that Yun Chujio's eyes were red, and he couldn't help but ask anxiously, "Junior Sister Yun, what happened? Are you crying?" Li Zhuangji and the others also looked at her with concern. After experiencing so many things, they had already treated Yun Chujio as a life and death friend. Yun Chujio sighed and said, "I haven't been feeling well these few days. I have been sneezing, so my eyes have become like this." Although Zhao Hui and the others felt that what Yun Chujio said seemed to be a bit far-fetched, but when they thought of Yun Chujio's outgoing personality, they felt that she didn't seem like someone who would let them suffer silently, so they believed her. They asked a few more questions with concern, and then began to chat. "Junior Sister Yun, you haven't gone out these few days because you don't know that Liao Tao and the others have already spread the word that they will teach us a lesson in the intersect competition in a few days." Li Zhuangji curled his lips and said. Zhao Hui echoed, "Yes, there are already many people who are prepared to bet on the same day. After all, it's impossible for us to win. However, I reckon that no one will bet on US winning. Those people will bet for nothing." You're tuning in to the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.